Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Oh God, this can't be happening. I thought as I weaved my car through the maze of traffic, my pulse racing. He can't be serious. Can he? Just 30 minutes ago, I was at work, sitting in my office at the bank, guiding a young couple through the process of securing their first home loan. It had been a routine day until the call came. The police. A calm yet firm voice on the other end informed me, "Ma'am, this is Officer Cook with the county police. We need your assistance. Your husband has been seen with a firearm inside your home." A firearm? I repeated, my stomach twisting in disbelief. "Yes, ma'am. A neighbor came over to borrow something and saw him with the weapon. He appears to be making threats." There was a slight pause, then the officer's voice dropped an octave, threats of taking himself out. "We believe your presence could help de-escalate the situation." Taking himself out? Alex? The words felt foreign, absurd. My husband loved life. Always the happy-go-lucky type. Cracking jokes, planning fishing trips, laughing at the most ridiculous things. He wasn't the kind of man to even entertain a thought like this. Unless, a fleeting thought flickered in my mind. One I shoved away almost as quickly as it surfaced. No, it couldn't be about that. Fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. I turned onto our street, and my heart dropped. The scene before me was chaos. Police cruisers lined the block, their blue and red lights painting the neighborhood in an eerie glow. Uniformed officers crowded the perimeter of the house, their voices blending into the hum of radios crackling orders. A live news truck from Channel 5 was parked haphazardly on Old Man Parker's lawn, its camera pointed squarely at my home. My breaths came in shallow gasps as I tried to maneuver my car closer. I needed to get to him, to talk to him before this spiraled out of control. But just as I reached the police cordon, an officer stepped into my path, raising his hand. "Miss, I'm sorry, you'll need to turn around. We've got a situation here and—" "That's my house." I screamed, my voice high and strained. "That's my husband in there." The officer blinked, studying me for a moment before stepping aside reluctantly and waving me through. I barely managed to park before I was ambushed by the local media. Microphones were thrust into my face, reporters barking questions over one another in a frenzy. "Mrs. Brown, has your husband ever shown violent tendencies? Has he attempted that before? Is this related to financial trouble or marital issues?" The questions came fast, each one more invasive than the last. I felt their cameras zero in on my face, the flashes blinding. I wanted to scream, to shove them aside, to demand they leave. Instead, I clenched my fists and pushed through, every nerve in my body focused on one goal: reaching Alex. Is he wanted for crimes anywhere else? I froze, unable to process the barrage of invasive questions from the reporters. Why won't they just leave me alone? My husband, my love, needed me, but the media had me cornered, their voices blending into a wall of noise, blocking my path to him. Before I could say a word, I felt a firm but gentle hand on my arm. An officer stepped between me and the vultures, shielding me from their relentless questioning. "This way," she said, her voice steady but kind. She guided me across the street to a van station just outside my home. Several men stood near it, huddled around a small table, their voices low and intense. "I can get a man inside right there," one of them said, pointing toward a corner of the house on a map. "He'll have a clear line of sight for a good shot." "We're not here to kill him," another replied sharply. "Our job is to help him. He's a danger to himself and my team. If he makes a move to attack—" "No," I shouted, my voice cutting through their grim discussion like a blade. All eyes turned to me, the air thick with tension. Before they could demand to know who I was, the officer who'd brought me spoke up. "This is Mrs. Brown." The man who had spoken second stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mrs. Brown, I'm Jason Harris. I'm the negotiator for the local PD. May I have a moment of your time?" Before I could respond, the first man interrupted. "We need to know how many weapons he has in there. For all we know, he could be armed to the teeth." "No," I said, cutting him off. "We don't own a gun. I don't know where he got the one you're talking about." "Must have acquired it recently," he muttered, turning to his team. "That's something. We'll start checking the local gun shops and—" I couldn't listen anymore. My voice trembled as I snapped, "Stop. You're wasting time. He needs help, not speculation." Jason raised a hand to calm me, his expression patient. "Ma'am, I understand how upsetting this is, but we need all the information we can get to handle this safely. Please, can we talk?" Reluctantly, I nodded, my heart pounding. All I could think about was Alex and the desperation he must be feeling. Rick, could you let me do my job before you start talking about shooting anyone? Jason's tone was sharp, and the look on my face must have driven the point home, as Rick fell silent. Are they serious about shooting my husband? The thought made my stomach churn. Jason turned to me, his demeanor softening as he gestured for me to follow him. Come with me, Mrs. Brown, he said, leading me a few steps away from the others. I need to ask you a few questions. Has your husband been showing any signs of depression lately? No, not really, I replied instinctively, but my conscience screamed, liar. The truth hovered at the edge of my mind, a shadow I couldn't quite face. There was that, but surely they didn't need to know. Jason exhaled heavily, studying me. Ma'am, may I call you Maria? I nodded silently. Maria, did you know your husband quit his job 2 days ago? What? My breath hitched. No, he couldn't have. We were just talking last night. He was so happy and… You mean happier than normal? Jason pressed gently. Well, I hesitated. We'd been going through some rough patches, but I thought we'd worked through them. Things were better. He was happy. Jason's voice remained calm but insistent. What kind of problems were you having? Sir, I don't see how that's relevant, I said, my voice tight. Maria, I understand this is uncomfortable, he said softly, but the more we know, the better chance we have of helping your husband. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Before I could respond, another officer jogged up to us, his expression urgent. Jason, we've made contact with him, he said. Jason frowned. How? I thought the phone lines in the house were down. Somehow, he's managed to send a signal to the live truck across the street, the officer replied. The crew says we can use their equipment to communicate with him if we agree to let them broadcast the exclusive. Jason's jaw tightened. I don't like this. How on earth could he get a signal to them? My voice broke in, edged with a mixture of pride and exasperation. My husband used to work at that station. He was the engineer for their live truck. He installed most of the gear in there himself, so if anyone could make it work, it'd be him. Jason raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. For a brief moment, despite the gravity of the situation, I felt a flicker of pride in Alex's brilliance. But it was quickly overshadowed by the grim reality that we were even having this conversation. They led me to the news truck, and stepping inside was like stepping back in time. It looked much like I remembered, though the carpet was different, newer, a darker shade. But the overwhelming array of buttons, switches, and monitors was the same. How Alex ever kept it all straight in his head was beyond me. Inside, one of the polished reporters who had accosted me earlier was seated, speaking animatedly into a microphone. Her eyes were fixed on one of the screens, her tone a mix of practiced urgency and drama. Then my eyes followed hers to the screen, and my breath caught in my throat. Alex was on the monitor. My heart twisted at the sight of him. He looked so different, almost unrecognizable. His normally shaggy, shoulder-length hair had been hacked into a severe buzz cut. His face was gaunt, shadowed by exhaustion or despair, and he was bare-chested, his skin pale under the dim light. But none of that was what truly chilled me. It was the gun. He held it in one hand, the image slightly grainy but unmistakable. Alex, who hated guns, who had always respected my fear of them, was clutching one now. Why? What could have pushed him to this? A suffocating wave of dread swept over me, clutching at my heart. Alex! Jason's voice broke through my thoughts as he snatched the microphone away from the reporter. His tone was steady but commanding. This is Jason Harris. I'm here to help you. Shut up, Alex barked, his voice jagged with rage, despair, and something unrecognizable, a hopelessness I had never heard before. It wasn't his voice, not the voice of my Alex, my loving husband. This was the voice of a man tormented, a man unraveling. I know what you're doing, Alex shouted, his words sharp and frantic. You're trying to stop me, but you can't. You can't. I have to do this. I can't go on. I can't live with what I've done. She can't forgive me and I… His voice cracked, heavy with anguish. I can't forgive myself. My legs threatened to give out beneath me. His pain was palpable, raw, and it tore through me like a blade. What had he done? What could he possibly believe was so unforgivable? Alex, who's she? Are you talking about your wife? Maria is here with me. I can put her on if you want. You can talk to her. Oh, you can't fool me. Alex cut him off, his voice rising with paranoia. She's not there. You're just trying to trick me. She wouldn't come. She hates me. How can we prove she's here, Alex? Jason asked, keeping his tone calm and steady. Show her to me, Alex demanded. Let me see her. Jason hesitated. Alex, we can't do that. Not with you holding a gun. Her safety. Then put her on the air. Split the screen. Put us in a box together. Jason turned to the reporter for clarification. What's he talking about? The woman's polished demeanor cracked just slightly as she explained. It's a common setup for TV news. We split the screen, one half showing him and the other showing her. They can talk to each other that way. Jason nodded decisively. Set it up. The reporter gestured to her team. Give us 3 minutes. We can be live. The air? You mean live? I asked, bewildered, the gravity of the situation sinking deeper. The reporter barely glanced at me as she replied, Of course, dear. How else is he going to see you? The next few minutes were a chaotic blur as the crew scrambled to set up cameras and coordinate with the station. Before I fully understood what was happening, I was sitting in front of a camera, a microphone clipped to my shirt, and a small earpiece nestled uncomfortably in my ear. And then, suddenly, his voice came through. Is that you, honey? Are you really there? Alex's voice was laced with disbelief and fragile hope. Oh, Alex! I cried, my heart breaking. What are you doing? I'm doing what I should have done 2 weeks ago, he interrupted, his tone flat and heavy. When I woke up next to Linda, I should have ended it all then, but I didn't. And now I have to pay. I can't stay here. Not after what I've done. My heart plummeted. He was still stuck on this. The affair. The guilt. I told him it was over. I forgave him. I thought we'd moved past it. But if he does this... Alex, please listen to me, I said, my voice trembling. That's all in the past. We've moved on. I forgave you. You forgave me, Alex said bitterly, his voice cracking with anguish. But I can't forgive myself. I was a good husband, a good man. But after that party, I had to ruin it. I had to. His voice faltered, and I could almost see the tears forming in his eyes through the monitor. I had to. He was still consumed by guilt, and now it was seeping into me, clawing at my insides. My own mistakes, my own guilt, they were all tangled together in this mess. I couldn't let him end it. I loved him too much to lose him, no matter how broken things had become. Damn Linda and her twisted advice. If only she hadn't. You know the funny thing, dear? Alex's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts, bitter and hollow. I can't even remember it. All I remember is being so sick the next day. It was all the drinking. Honey, I said gently, desperately trying to soothe him. You were out of your mind. Drunk. You couldn't help what happened. But I could. His voice cracked with anguish. And look what I did. I broke my vows, and I made you break them too. I felt the weight of the stares around me, the silent judgment of everyone listening. But I couldn't stop. He was too agitated, too raw. His pain was palpable, and he was serious. Oh, honey, I never should have done what I did, I said, my voice trembling. But I thought I had to get revenge on you. Mike meant nothing. But you enjoyed it, Alex interrupted, his voice rising, trembling with anger and despair. I know you did. You made me listen. I turned you into a prostitute. What kind of man does that to his wife? Honey, we can get past this, I pleaded, my heart pounding. My revenge was stupid. I should have never listened to Linda. Linda? His tone shifted sharply, suspicion cutting through the pain. I thought you didn't talk to her anymore. My stomach dropped. Panic gripped me. Oh God, think fast. She came to me, I said quickly. She apologized. She said I needed to get back at you. But I think she was projecting her own hurt. She wasn't thinking straight. Alex let out a bitter laugh, the sound chilling. Maria, I love you, but I can't do this. I can't live like this anymore. His voice cracked as he choked out. I slept with another woman. I broke your trust. I ruined us. I deserve to die. I can't live with that knowledge. Tears streamed down my face as I stared into the camera, willing my words to reach him, to pull him back from the edge. His words cut straight to my heart. Then, to my absolute horror, he lifted the gun to his head. No, he's going to do it. I can't let him. The words burst out of me before I even had time to think. You never slept with Linda. Everything went still. The room, the people, even the air seemed frozen in place. The shock was palpable, none more so than on Alex's face, or my own. I couldn't believe what I just said. I swore I'd never tell him the truth. What do you mean? He asked, his voice shaking. I woke up next to her. We were naked. She told me I can't let this go on. I interrupted, my voice trembling. She lied. He stared into the camera, his confusion plain. Then how did? We drugged you, Alex, I blurted out, unable to hold back any longer. To make you think you cheated. I knew you never would, but we thought if you believed you had, you'd let me sleep with Mike. I'm sorry, honey. I just wanted to be with him. It was nothing more than that. I had to. Why would you do that? He cut in, his voice rising with anger and disbelief. What did I do to deserve that? Nothing. I cried, tears streaming down my face. It was all me. Linda kept telling me how great of a lover he was, and we were virgins when we got married. I just wanted to see what I'd missed out on. I'm sorry, Alex. You never broke your vows. You're a good man. You've always been a good man. He lowered the gun slightly, his face contorted with pain. You were going to let me think I cheated on you? How long had you planned this? How did you even drug me? Didn't you care? I could have died. I knew you wouldn't, I said quickly, desperate to justify myself. I almost called it off when you were so sick for those days, but when you got better, I decided to go through with it. We only came up with the idea a month ago. When we couldn't get you interested in Linda, this was the only way. I just had to sleep with Mike. It was something new, and I was so excited. What did you give me? Alex demanded, his voice low and trembling with restrained fury. Linda stole something from the hospital where she volunteers, I admitted, my words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I don't know exactly what it was, but it worked too well. She tried to wake you up, but you didn't. She was so excited about being with you, Alex. She was looking forward to it. His face twisted with disgust. How long, Maria? How long were you going to let me live in this hell? Tears streamed down my face as I tried to explain. Oh, honey, I thought that if we just did it once, if I got it out of my system, and then we got back to normal a few days later, we could move on. We can move past this, Alex. I still love you. Love me? His voice rose, sharp and incredulous. You call this love? Love doesn't mean drugging me. It doesn't mean plotting with someone to destroy my life. Before I could respond, Alex disappeared from the camera feed. Panic gripped me as I waited, every second dragging like an eternity. Then I heard it, the front door slamming open. I turned to see him storming out of the house, his movements erratic, his eyes wild with anguish. The gun was still in his hand, and the sight of it sent a wave of terror through me. The police shouted, their commands overlapping in a chaotic din, but Jason quickly stepped in, holding them back. Alex marched toward me, his voice a mixture of raw anger and unimaginable pain. You love me? He bellowed. Love doesn't mean trying to destroy me, Maria. It doesn't mean letting some monster violate me in my own home. The officers continued shouting commands, their voices creating a chaotic backdrop. Put the gun down. Surrender now. Jason was darting between them, desperately trying to restore order and keep the situation from spiraling out of control. I was wrong, Alex. I yelled, my voice cracking with desperation. I had to calm him down, to make him forgive me. He always forgives me, I thought. I got caught up in my obsession. I never meant to hurt you. I moved to run toward him, but an officer grabbed my arm, holding me back. Alex's face twisted in anguish, his voice raw and trembling with emotion. You made me believe I was some kind of monster, some stupid adulterer, he shouted, his pacing frantic as he moved back and forth across the yard. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Thinking I'd betrayed you so badly that you felt justified in throwing away our marriage vows with some stranger? It killed me, Maria. It killed me inside. I could feel the weight of his pain in every word as he gestured wildly, the gun in his hand adding to the tension in the air. I can't do this, he continued, his voice breaking. You betrayed me, Maria. You betrayed my trust, my love, everything we built together. You could have killed me with what you gave me, and then you turned around and tried to kill my spirit, my heart, my soul, the love I had for you. And now you think we can just go back to how things were. He stopped pacing for a moment, his eyes boring into mine, filled with an almost unbearable mix of anger and despair. What was going to happen the next time you got obsessed? Huh? He demanded. Would you drug me again? Manipulate me again? Would I end up brain dead one day, so you could have your fun guilt-free? The world around us seemed to vanish, leaving only Alex and me, surrounded by the unbearable weight of the pain I had caused. No, Alex! I screamed, my voice trembling. It was just that one time. I would never have done it again. Please believe me. I love you so much. Tears blurred my vision as the life I had known, the love we had shared, slipped through my fingers. It's over, Maria, Alex said coldly, his voice filled with finality. I loved you. And you did this? His eyes locked onto mine for one last agonizing moment. Goodbye. I screamed as he raised the gun to his mouth, my heart shattering. Unable to bear it, I turned away, waiting for the deafening sound that would end the life of the man I loved. How could I have been so foolish? How could I have let my selfishness destroy everything? But instead of the explosive crack of a gunshot, there was nothing. No sound. The officer holding me shook slightly, and I realized with a jolt of disbelief, he was laughing. I turned to him, confused and horrified. His quiet chuckle sent a wave of anger and bewilderment through me. I glanced around, noticing that other officers were also suppressing laughter, some with their hands covering their mouths. What on earth was happening? Terrified, I turned back to Alex. His expression had shifted from anguish to disgust. He pulled the gun from his mouth and began coughing in a way that immediately brought to mind our cat hacking up a hairball. Lemon? He spat, glaring at the weapon as if it had betrayed him. Lemon? Whose genius idea was this? He aimed the gun at his hand and pulled the trigger several times, demonstrating its uselessness. They're all lemons. You idiots. At that, the tension snapped, and the officers erupted into laughter, the sound echoing through the yard like an absurd mockery of the moment's gravity. Real funny, guys, Alex muttered, glaring at the nearest officer. But I always carry a reload. My heart froze as he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small clip and sliding it into the gun. But something about the movement was off. He raised the weapon to his mouth again, pulled the trigger, and, to my utter shock, began to chew. What was happening? The surreal absurdity of the scene left me utterly paralyzed. Cherry. I love that flavor. Alex glanced at me, then shifted his gaze to the stunned TV reporters. Pez. Alex's laughter echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of how thoroughly I had been played. Oh, you thought you could get one over on me, huh? Remember last week when I was testing out the new security equipment for Max? One of the things I tried was an electronic ear. Guess what I overheard? You and that bitch Linda, plotting your little scheme. You had me fooled, Maria. I was on the edge. But then I heard everything and I got mad. The officer who had been holding me took my arms and pulled them behind me, snapping handcuffs into place. I could feel the cold metal tighten around my wrists. We couldn't charge you with anything before, you know? It was just your word against mine. But that's when I, along with some of the officers here, came up with this. Alex gestured to the scene unfolding around us. We didn't count on the news van being here, but we adapted. Guess it worked out for us. He chuckled darkly. You were so easy to fool. Now we've got you, Maria, my loving wife. And I wonder what the charges will be. Jason, we discussed aggravated assault, right? Oh, and how about misuse of a controlled substance? Of course, Linda will be charged too. Thanks for the confession. And just so you know, it's all on live TV. Do you think your parents were watching? The sarcasm in his voice sent a chill deep into my bones. An officer approached and slipped a blue paper into the pocket of my jacket. You have been served at 2:18 p.m. on the 8th of June. Thank you. Served? My heart sank. No, this couldn't be real. All I wanted was to experience something different, to feel young again. Just one last fling before we started our family. Before I became a mother. What? You honestly think I'd stay married to someone like you after all this? Oh, how foolish you must think I am. Alex turned to the reporter. Apologies for misleading you, but it was the only way. My world was crumbling. This couldn't be happening. I had plans. I was going to have kids with Alex this year. We were going to be that perfect family. Soccer games, picnics, and barbecues. I had a husband who loved me, or I thought he did. My thoughts spiraled. Was this all just a nightmare? How could I have been so foolish? The affair wasn't even worth it. How could I ever make him forgive me? As the officer led me away to read me my rights, I overheard the reporter's voice. Oh, that's fine. But could we get an interview? Maybe just the two of us? Over dinner, perhaps? That's when I knew. It was truly over. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world are you watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. The rhythmic splash of water and excited chatter of children filled the air as Kyle Joyce watched his daughter Emma execute a perfect butterfly stroke across the pool. His trained eye caught the slight adjustment needed in her shoulder rotation, but pride swelled in his chest at her determination. At 11, she was already showing the dedication that would take her far in competitive swimming. His phone buzzed with a message from his wife. "Sorry, can't make it to practice again. Emergency meeting with Saul about the Richardson development. Don't wait up." Kyle's jaw tightened imperceptibly as he deleted the message. Third missed practice this week. He glanced at Emma, grateful she was too focused on her training to check if her mother had arrived. "Beautiful form, Emma," Coach Sally Daniel called out. "Just remember to keep those shoulders loose on the rotation." Later that evening, at his pediatric physical therapy clinic, Kyle worked with 6-year-old Marcus, who was making remarkable progress after a severe car accident. "That's it, buddy," Kyle encouraged, supporting the boy's weight as he took tentative steps. "You're doing great." Faith Bruce, his clinic manager, appeared in the doorway. "Kyle, got a minute?" Corporate sent another email about the buyout offer. "After I finish with Marcus," Kyle replied, maintaining his focus on the child's progress. Marcus's mother watched anxiously from her chair, and Kyle gave her a reassuring smile. 20 minutes later, in his office, Faith handed him the printed email. "They're getting aggressive, threatening to open a competing clinic 2 blocks away if you don't sell." Kyle scanned the document, his expression hardening. They'd turn this into an assembly line. 15-minute sessions, standardized treatment plans, insurance-dictated care. Everything I've fought against. "We both know what happens to kids like Marcus under corporate care," Faith agreed, leaning against his desk. "But they're offering serious money, Kyle." "Money isn't everything." He set the paper aside. "How's the Williams case progressing?" Faith started to respond when Kyle's phone lit up with a text from Emma. "Dad, I qualified for states." "Where's Mom?" Kyle's stomach clenched. Marilyn had promised to be there for this meet. He'd reminded her 3 times this morning. "Everything okay?" Faith asked, noting his expression. Marilyn missed Emma's qualifying meet. Kyle ran a hand through his hair. "Another emergency with Saul Wiley." Faith's face remained carefully neutral. "The new boss who's been keeping her late every night?" "The same." Kyle pulled up his calendar. "She's missed 8 of Emma's events since he took over 2 months ago." "People talk, you know," Faith said carefully. "At the real estate office." Kyle looked up sharply. "What kind of talk?" "Just observations. Late meetings, closed doors. The way he looks at her in public." Faith hesitated. "And the way she lets him." The first concrete piece of evidence came on a Tuesday afternoon. Faith was leaving a client lunch when she spotted Marilyn's distinctive red Tesla parked at the Westbrook Hotel at 2 p.m. during what was supposed to be a board meeting at her office. Faith's hand shook slightly as she snapped a photo. She'd known Kyle since college, watched him build his practice from nothing, seen his dedication to every child who came through his doors. He didn't deserve this. Later that week, Emma burst into Kyle's office after school, her backpack still on. "Dad, you'll never guess who I saw today." Kyle looked up from his paperwork. "Who's that?" "Sweetheart, Mom and Uncle Saul. They were having lunch at Castellano's when I walked by with Jenny after early dismissal." Emma dropped into a chair. "Mom looked really surprised to see me. Like, really surprised. She said they were having a work lunch, but..." She frowned. "She didn't know we had early dismissal today?" Kyle kept his expression neutral. "Did she say anything else?" "No, she just kept saying it was a work thing." "But Dad..." Emma lowered her voice. Uncle Saul had his hand on her arm. Like, not in a work way. That night, after Emma was asleep, Kyle sat in his home office reviewing credit card statements. The charges jumped out at him. La Pearl Boutique, $430. The Westbrook Hotel, $289. The Grand Marina Hotel, $315. All on days he'd been working late at the clinic. His phone buzzed with a text from Faith. "Check your email. Security footage from last week." "I'm sorry." The video was grainy but clear enough. Marilyn entering Saul's office at 9:47 p.m., leaving at 1:23 a.m. Her hair disheveled, his tie loose. Kyle's hands didn't shake as he downloaded and saved the file. His voice was steady when he called his lawyer the next morning to schedule a consultation. The final confirmation came through Emma, ironically. She'd borrowed Marilyn's iPad for a school project when the messages started popping up. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. S. Missing your touch already. These meetings are torture when I can't have you. S. Soon, baby. Kyle's working late again Thursday. The usual place? M. Emma, confused and disturbed, brought the iPad to her father. Kyle took screenshots, his heart breaking for his daughter even as his resolve hardened. The initial confrontation happened on a Sunday evening. Emma was at a sleepover, and Kyle had spent the day gathering his evidence and consulting with his lawyer. We need to talk about Saul, Kyle said as Marilyn scrolled through her phone on the couch. She didn't look up. What about him? About your affair with him. Now she looked up, her face a mask of practiced innocence that quickly shifted to defensive anger. It was one mistake, Kyle. One drunken mistake that meant nothing. Really? Kyle's voice was ice. One mistake that's been happening for months. In multiple hotels? Color drained from Marilyn's face. You've been spying on me? No, you've been careless. And Emma saw you. She's just a child. She doesn't understand. She understands enough. Kyle pulled out his phone. Want to explain these messages? Or the hotel charges? Or maybe the security footage? Marilyn's mask cracked. You sanctimonious bastard. You think you're so perfect with your little charity clinic and your holier-than-thou attitude about patient care. At least Saul understands ambition. Ambition? Kyle's laugh was cold. Is that what you call sleeping your way up the corporate ladder? You're just jealous because I make real money while you play savior to crippled kids. The words hung in the air like poison. Get out, Kyle said quietly. Now. This is my house too. The house I bought before we married? With my inheritance? That house. Kyle's smile was razor sharp. You have 30 minutes to pack a bag. Then I'm changing the locks. That's when Alberta Merritt, Marilyn's mother, launched her attack. She'd arrived unannounced, clearly summoned by a crying phone call from Marilyn. How dare you throw my daughter out? Alberta shrieked, bursting into the house. After all she's sacrificed for you. Working those long hours to support your little vanity project of a clinic. Kyle stood his ground. Your daughter is having an affair with her boss. She's neglected Emma for months. And now she's trying to paint herself as the victim. Because she is. Alberta advanced on him. If you'd been a proper husband, given her the attention she deserved. The attention she deserves? Kyle's voice rose slightly. Like the attention she gives Emma? When was the last time she attended a swim meet? A parent-teacher conference? Hell, when was the last time she made dinner for her daughter? Don't you dare question her mothering. Alberta spat. Emma would choose her over you any day. Marilyn, who had been watching the exchange with calculated tears, suddenly smiled. It was an ugly expression that revealed her true nature. She's right, Marilyn said coldly. I'm her mother. I have money, influence. Connections. What do you have? A failing clinic and a hero complex? No judge will side with you. We'll see about that, Kyle replied calmly. Now get out of my house before I call the police. The final betrayal came from Drew O'Connor, Kyle's friend of 15 years. They met for coffee at Drew's insistence. I need to tell you something, Drew said, staring into his cup. I've known about Marilyn and Saul. For months. Kyle's face remained impassive. And you didn't think to tell me? I was trying to protect you, man. You've got so much on your plate with the clinic and Emma. Protect me? Kyle's voice was deadly quiet. By watching my wife make a fool of me? By letting my daughter get hurt? It's not that simple. Actually, it is. Kyle stood up. You chose sides, Drew. You chose wrong. As he walked out of the coffee shop, his phone buzzed with messages from mutual friends. They'd heard Marilyn's version. Kyle was controlling, emotionally unavailable, married to his work. They believed her. Kyle blocked their numbers one by one, his resolve strengthening with each deletion. He had all the evidence he needed. Now it was time to plan his next move. Emma was waiting when he got home, curled up on the couch with her swim team hoodie. Dad? Her voice was small. Is Mom coming back? Kyle sat beside her, pulling her close. Not right now, sweetheart. But I promise you, I'm not going anywhere. We're going to get through this together. I know, Dad. Emma hugged him tight. I saw the messages on her iPad. I'm not stupid. She chose him over us, didn't she? Kyle's heart broke and reformed, stronger and more determined. Some people make bad choices, Em. But that's on them, not us. Want to help me make dinner? As they moved to the kitchen, Kyle's phone lit up with a text from Faith. Just heard what happened. Need anything? He looked at Emma, already pulling ingredients from the fridge, and typed back. Just your friendship. For now. The pieces were in place. Marilyn had shown her true colors. Now it was time to make her face the consequences of her choices. But first, he had a daughter to take care of and a clinic to protect. Kyle Joyce might be just a physical therapist in Marilyn's eyes, but he was about to show her exactly what kind of man she'd underestimated. The morning after throwing Marilyn out, Kyle sat in his office reviewing financial statements when Faith knocked on his door. You need to see this, she said, placing a business card on his desk. Dr. Rachel Lake, Saul Wiley's wife. Kyle studied the card. Pediatrician at Eastbrook Children's Hospital. She called the clinic asking to meet you. Says it's personal, not professional. Faith lowered her voice. She knows, Kyle. The meeting was arranged at a small coffee shop across town. Rachel Lake proved to be a sharp-featured woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She got straight to the point. How long have you known? She asked, stirring her untouched coffee. About 2 months. You? Suspected for 6. Rachel's smile was bitter. Saul's not as clever as he thinks. This is his pattern. Young executives, usually married. Makes them feel special, powerful. Until he discards them. Kyle leaned forward. Tell me more. 2 previous affairs with employees. Both ended in NDAs and generous severance packages. Rachel pulled out a manila envelope. The companies buried it to avoid scandal. But I kept copies. Why show me this? Because this time he picked the wrong target. Rachel's eyes hardened. Your wife may be willing to destroy her family for him, but I'm done protecting his reputation. Their alliance formed over the next hour. Rachel had resources, connections, and 20 years of documented evidence. Kyle had Faith's security footage and Emma's iPad messages. There's someone else you should meet, Kyle said, making a call. Heidi Carey, my lawyer. Heidi arrived 20 minutes later, a force of nature in a tailored suit. Dr. Lake, your husband handled my daughter's physical therapy 5 years ago, she explained, sitting down. Best care she ever received. That's why I'm handling both your cases pro bono. Both cases? Rachel asked. Divorce and corporate malfeasance. Heidi's smile was predatory. Kyle's evidence plus your documentation? We're going to destroy them. Back at the clinic, Faith compiled everything. Security footage, emails, witness statements from office staff who'd seen Marilyn and Saul's meetings. Sally Daniel called. Faith mentioned. Organizing files. Emma's swim coach? She's documented every meet Marilyn's missed, every practice she skipped. Says she'll testify if needed. Kyle nodded, reviewing the growing evidence. They thought I'd just roll over and take it. That I'd be too afraid of losing Emma to fight back. They don't know you very well, do they? Faith's hand brushed his shoulder briefly. No, Kyle agreed. They really don't. The security system installation took half a day. Every entrance covered, the technician confirmed. Audio and video recording, motion sensors, remote monitoring. Everything uploads automatically to secure cloud storage. Kyle handed him a check. Perfect. Dr. Eileen Castro's child psychology practice came highly recommended. She met with Emma while Kyle waited outside. She's angry, Dr. Castro reported afterward. Not at you. At her mother's betrayal. She feels abandoned, replaced. These sessions will help document the emotional impact. How's she really doing? Kyle asked, paternal concern breaking through his calculated demeanor. She's resilient. Having your stable presence helps enormously. Dr. Castro's expression turned professional. I'm documenting everything for the custody hearing. Marilyn's behavior patterns, Emma's emotional state, your consistent involvement. The court will have a clear picture. That afternoon, Kyle met with his financial advisor. Half the joint assets were transferred to protected accounts, completely legal, given the circumstances. The advisor had worked with enough divorce cases to know the drill. She'll try to drain the accounts when she realizes what's happening, he warned. Let her try, Kyle replied. Everything's documented. Rachel's investigation into Saul's business practices yielded gold. Look at these property deals, she said during their next meeting. Ethical violations everywhere. Insider trading, kickbacks, manipulated valuations. He's been using his affairs to keep people quiet. And Marilyn? Complicit. Rachel's disgust was evident. She's been helping him hide the paperwork. That's why he targeted her. He needed someone in real estate who'd play along. Kyle maintained meticulous records of his parenting duties. Every school pickup, every meal prepared, every homework session helped. Emma's activities filled his calendar. Swim practice, doctor appointments, tutoring. Marilyn's attempts at gaslighting grew more frequent. She'd change plans last minute, then deny they'd ever been made. Each incident was recorded, documented, timed. I told you I'd take Emma this weekend, she'd insist. No, you said next weekend, Kyle would reply calmly, recording everything. You're trying to turn her against me. You're doing that yourself, Marilyn. Alberta proved to be a problem. She showed up unannounced one afternoon while Emma was doing homework. I'm taking my granddaughter shopping, she announced, barging in. No, you're not, Kyle said firmly. You don't have permission to take her anywhere. I don't need permission. I'm her grandmother. You need my permission. Kyle's voice was steel. And after your little performance at dinner, you're not getting it. How dare you? The security system is recording, Alberta. Every word, every action. Keep that in mind. She left in a fury, but the incident was preserved. Another piece of evidence for the custody hearing. The invitation arrived on expensive cardstock. Marilyn's 37th birthday celebration at Le Maison, the city's most exclusive hotel. Quite a guest list, Rachel remarked, reviewing the names. Board members, social climbers, everyone who's been enabling their affair. She's gathering her witnesses. Sources say she's planning some kind of announcement, Heidi added, painting herself as the victim of a loveless marriage, forced to find happiness elsewhere. Kyle's laugh was cold. Is that her play? Not just hers. Rachel's expression was grim. Saul's planning to announce our divorce. He'll blame my emotional instability, classic gaslighting. Make it seem like I drove him to cheat. Perfect timing, Heidi said. Everything's ready. HR department, real estate board, family court. All the evidence packages are prepared. Emma's spending that weekend with your parents? Rachel confirmed. Kyle nodded. They'll keep her safe while we finish this. The final pieces fell into place. Process servers were arranged, disguised as hotel staff. Key witnesses were positioned. Everything was documented, time-stamped, legally bulletproof. You realize there's no going back from this, Faith said quietly as they reviewed the final preparations. Kyle thought of Emma's face when she saw those messages. Thought of Marilyn's cruel words, her threats about custody. Thought of every missed meet, every broken promise, every lie. Good, he replied. That's exactly what I want. Rachel squeezed his shoulder. They thought we'd be easy targets. The devoted father too afraid of losing his daughter to fight. The doctor's wife too concerned with appearances to make a scene. Their mistake, Kyle said simply. The trap was set. Everything was in place. Now they just had to wait for Marilyn's birthday party and watch their carefully orchestrated plan unfold. As Kyle tucked Emma in that night before she left for his parents' house, she hugged him tight. You're not letting Mom take me away, are you, Dad? Never, he promised. Some battles are worth fighting. You're worth every single one. He closed her door and checked his phone. Messages from Heidi, Rachel, and Faith confirmed everything was ready. In 2 days, Marilyn and Saul would learn exactly what happened when they underestimated the wrong people. Kyle smiled, thinking of Emma's words from months ago. I'm not stupid. She chose him over us. Well, now they'd all face the consequences of that choice. The party invitations sat on his desk, mocking in their elegance. Soon, that expensive cardstock would be the least of Marilyn's concerns. Kyle had built his career helping children overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Now he'd use that same patience, that same strategic thinking, to protect his daughter and destroy those who tried to hurt her. Let them think he was weak. Let them believe their lies. The trap was set, and this time, there would be no escape. Lou Maison's grand ballroom sparkled with expensive decorations and even more expensive guests. Marilyn held court near the champagne fountain, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Saul Wiley stood nearby, his proprietary smile barely disguising his smugness. "And here's to my beautiful daughter," Alberta Merritt's voice carried across the room as she raised her glass. "Who showed such strength in the face of neglect and isolation." From their observation point in the hotel lobby, Kyle and Rachel watched the security feed on Faith's tablet. "Your mother-in-law has quite the imagination," Rachel remarked dryly. "Oh, she's just warming up," Kyle replied, checking his watch. "Ready?" Rachel smoothed her elegant black dress. "Born ready." Inside, Alberta continued her performance. "A mother's love is sacred. When Marilyn came to me, devastated by years of emotional abandonment, the ballroom doors opened. Heads turned as Kyle and Rachel made their calculated entrance. Marilyn's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. "Now," Kyle spoke quietly into his earpiece. The servers, carefully selected process servers in disguise, moved with practiced precision. 3 approached Marilyn simultaneously, another 2 converged on Saul. Papers were served with quiet professionalism. "What is this?" Marilyn's voice rose shrilly as she stared at the documents. "You dare crash my party, Mrs. Joyce," one server interrupted politely. "You've been served with divorce papers, a custody suit, and a corporate ethics violation notice." Saul's face purpled as he received his own stack. "This is ridiculous. I'll have your jobs for." "Mr. Wiley," another server continued calmly, "you've been served with divorce papers, a corporate ethics investigation notice, and documentation of workplace harassment violations." Kyle's team moved efficiently through the crowd. The HR representative received detailed documentation of the affair and its impact on workplace dynamics. Board members were handed evidence of ethical violations. The family court mediator received comprehensive documentation of Marilyn's parental neglect. Phones emerged from pockets and purses, recording everything. Marilyn's carefully maintained mask cracked completely. "You bastard!" she shrieked at Kyle. "You planned this? At my birthday party?" "Planned what?" Kyle's voice carried clearly. "I'm just delivering truth to your carefully selected audience." Saul advanced menacingly toward Kyle. "You think you can humiliate us like this?" Step rooms and secret messages. About using corporate resources to hide affairs. The crowd murmured, papers rustling as people read the evidence. "You're lying." Marilyn's voice cracked. "He's lying. I'm a good mother." "The records say otherwise," Kyle replied. "Every missed event, every broken promise, every time you chose your affair over our daughter. It's all documented." The ballroom had become very quiet except for the sound of papers being reviewed and phones recording. "Get out," Marilyn screamed. "Get out of my party." "Your party?" Kyle smiled coldly. "I think it just became a business meeting. You might want to start explaining those property deals to your board members." The real estate board's ethics investigation moved with unusual speed, perhaps motivated by the viral videos of Saul's threatening behavior at the party. Previous NDAs have surfaced, Heidi reported during their strategy meeting. 2 former employees came forward after seeing the party footage. "Turns out money can't quite buy silence forever, especially when they smell blood in the water," Rachel added with satisfaction. The custody hearing was equally decisive. Alberta's recorded threats from the security system played clearly for the judge. "I'll take that child whether you like it or not." Her voice rang through the courtroom. "You have no right to keep her from us." Kyle's documented involvement in Emma's life created a stark contrast. Every swim meet attended, every doctor's appointment managed, every school event supported, while Marilyn's absences mounted. Dr. Castro's professional testimony proved devastating. Emma exhibits clear signs of emotional abandonment from her mother, compounded by the discovery of the affair. Mrs. Joyce's pattern of choosing her relationship with Mr. Wiley over her daughter's needs has caused significant trauma. Drew's attempt to defend Marilyn backfired spectacularly when Kyle's lawyer cross-examined him. So you knew about the affair for months? I was trying to protect. Yes or no, Mr. O'Connor? Did you knowingly help conceal this situation?
Yes.
While watching Emma suffer, Drew's silence spoke volumes. The corporate investigation revealed deeper corruption than anyone expected. Marilyn's financial misconduct with company resources became impossible to ignore. She used corporate accounts to book hotel rooms, the forensic accountant testified, falsified expense reports to hide gifts, used company cars for personal meetings. Kyle's clinic received an unexpected surge of support when the story broke. Former patients' families rallied around him, sharing stories of his dedication and care. He spent extra hours with my son, one mother told the local news. Never rushed us, never compromised care for profit. And they wanted to force him out? Shame on them. The corporate healthcare provider quietly withdrew their buyout attempt. The judge's ruling was unequivocal. Primary custody is awarded to Kyle Joyce. Mrs. Joyce will have supervised visitation only, pending completion of parenting classes and counseling. Emma's response was to hug her father tightly. Can we get ice cream? Kyle laughed, his first genuine laugh in months. Absolutely. The state swimming championship became Emma's moment of triumph. Kyle and Faith cheered from the stands as she touched the wall first, setting a new personal record. That's my girl, Kyle said proudly. Faith's hand found his. She's amazing. Like her father. Saul's firing made headlines, especially after the harassment suits went public. Marilyn lost her executive position the same day, forced to accept a lower-level position at a smaller firm in another city. Alberta's attempts to contact Emma were firmly blocked. The restraining order is quite clear. Kyle told the security guard at Emma's school. No unsupervised contact. The partnership between Kyle's clinic and Rachel's pediatric practice created an innovative new therapy program. We're helping twice as many kids now, Rachel noted during their opening celebration. Some good came from all this. Emma's 12th birthday party filled Kyle's backyard with real friends, people who had stood by them through everything. Sally Daniel brought the swim team. Faith organized games. Rachel's children mixed easily with Emma's school friends. A package arrived that morning, Marilyn's attempt at manipulation. An expensive gift with a tearful card about healing our family. What should we do with it? Emma asked. Kyle smiled. I was thinking the children's hospital could use it more. Emma hugged him. Good call, Dad. Later, as Kyle cleaned up after the party, Faith helped gather decorations. Emma mentioned wanting to visit the coast this summer, she said casually. She loves the beach. Kyle looked at her thoughtfully. Would you like to join us? Faith's smile was answer enough. The party aftermath sparkled with possibility, not just of new beginnings, but of victories well-earned and battles correctly fought. Kyle had protected what mattered most, destroyed those who threatened it, and emerged stronger. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't just success. It was success built on unwavering principle and patient strength. As he watched Faith and Emma laughing together over the last piece of birthday cake, Kyle knew he'd chosen exactly the right path. Dad, Emma called. Faith's never been surfing. Can we teach her this summer? Kyle met Faith's eyes across the room. I think that's an excellent idea. The future stretched bright before them, free from manipulation and lies. They'd earned every bit of it. Epilogue. 5 years later. A warm spring breeze carried the scent of blooming roses through Kyle's expanded clinic courtyard. The therapeutic garden, a joint project with Rachel's pediatric practice, buzzed with activity as children worked on their motor skills through gardening. Faith watched from their shared office as Kyle guided a young patient through balance exercises. After 5 years of marriage, she still admired his unwavering dedication to his patients. Their wedding had been small but joyful, with 16-year-old Emma as maid of honor and Rachel's children in the wedding party. Dad's doing the thing again, Emma commented, joining Faith at the window. Fresh from swim practice, she'd grown into a striking young woman, recently accepted to Stanford on a swimming scholarship. The thing? Faith smiled, knowing exactly what Emma meant. Where he spends extra time with the kids who remind him of me at that age. Emma's own smile was understanding. He never could resist helping the determined ones. The clinic had become a model for ethical pediatric care, featured in medical journals and studied by healthcare providers nationwide. The corporate buyout attempt felt like ancient history, especially after their innovative therapy program garnered national attention. Rachel entered, carrying fresh coffee. At 47, she'd found her own happiness, recently engaged to a fellow pediatrician who understood her dedication to her patients. "Quarterly numbers are in," she announced. "Our joint practice is outperforming every corporate healthcare center in the state. Success through integrity," Faith quoted their unofficial motto. "How's the new therapy wing coming along?" "On schedule. The sensory garden should be ready for summer sessions." Rachel paused, checking her phone. "Oh, you'll love this. Guess who's trying to rebuild her reputation again?" Faith raised an eyebrow. "Marilyn?" Posted another heartfelt apology on social media. Claims she's grown and learned from her mistakes. Rachel's tone dripped sarcasm. The comments are not kind. 5 years hadn't been gentle to Marilyn Joyce, formerly Wiley. After losing her executive position, she'd bounced between smaller firms, her reputation following her like a shadow. Her supervised visitation with Emma had ended when Emma turned 14 and firmly refused further contact. "She sent another birthday card last week," Emma mentioned casually. "Dad and I donated it to the Children's Hospital, like always." Saul Wiley's fall had been even more spectacular. The harassment suits had multiplied once victims realized they weren't alone. His legal fees had drained his savings, and his attempts to rebuild his career were consistently thwarted by his own documented behavior. He tried applying for a position at Western Real Estate, Rachel shared. They Googled his name and ended the interview in 5 minutes. The last they'd heard, Saul and Marilyn had tried reconnecting, a desperate attempt to reclaim their former glory. It had ended predictably, with Saul being caught with another younger executive and Marilyn facing fresh humiliation. Alberta Merritt had never accepted her reduced circumstances. Her attempts to contact Emma through social media had earned her a restraining order extension. Now she spent her time writing bitter blog posts about parental alienation that nobody read. "Remember Drew?" Emma asked suddenly. "He came into the coffee shop yesterday, tried to make small talk about old times. How's he doing?" Faith asked, though she knew the story. "Working entry-level sales at some startup. Turns out being known as the guy who helped cover up workplace harassment isn't great for your career." Emma shrugged. "He asked about Mom. Actually, I told him I already had all the parents I needed." Faith hugged her stepdaughter, heart swelling. Their relationship had grown naturally, built on respect and genuine care rather than forced connections. The therapy garden continued flourishing, much like their blended family. Kyle's patient philosophy had transformed into a comprehensive treatment approach that prioritized long-term care over quick profits. The waiting list for their clinic grew longer each month. "Hey," Kyle entered the office, finished with his patient. "What's everyone doing in here?" "Watching you work your magic," Faith replied, accepting his quick kiss. "And sharing news. Stanford sent Emma's housing information." "Already?" Kyle looked at his daughter proudly. "Seems like yesterday you were that determined 11-year-old who wouldn't give up on her butterfly stroke." "Well, someone taught me about persistence," Emma smiled. "And integrity. And choosing the right battles." Rachel checked her watch. "Speaking of battles, we should head to the board meeting. They're voting on implementing our therapy program across the hospital network." As they gathered their materials, Kyle paused to look around his office. Photos tracked their family's growth. Emma's state championships, his wedding to Faith, family vacations, Rachel's engagement party, clinic expansions, graduation ceremonies. Each image represented a victory built on principle rather than compromise. "Coming to dinner tonight?" he asked Rachel. "The kids want to hear more stories about their favorite aunt's medical school adventures." "Wouldn't miss it," Rachel replied. "Someone needs to balance out all these swimming stories." They walked together through the therapy garden, passing children who were healing and growing stronger every day. The scent of roses followed them, a reminder of how beauty could flourish in unexpected places. Later that evening, their home filled with laughter as their extended family gathered for their traditional weekly dinner. Kyle watched Emma demonstrating proper swimming technique to Rachel's youngest, while Faith and Rachel debated the merits of different therapy approaches. His phone buzzed. Another desperate message from Marilyn, sent through a mutual acquaintance. Something about regret and second chances. Kyle deleted it without reading further. Some chapters were better left closed. Dad, Emma called. Tell them about the time you and Faith got lost trying to find that surfing spot. Kyle joined his family, leaving thoughts of the past behind. They built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal, a testament to the power of choosing right over easy, integrity over compromise. Success, they learned, wasn't just about winning. It was about winning on your own terms, staying true to your principles even when the easy path beckoned. Their happiness wasn't revenge. It was justice, earned through unwavering strength and patient determination. The roses in their garden bloomed stronger each year, their roots deep and stable, just like their family, built on trust, nourished by love, and strengthened by the storms they'd weathered together. Faith caught his eye across the room, her smile saying everything words couldn't. They'd chosen their paths, fought their battles, and emerged stronger. Together. And that, Kyle reflected as he looked at his thriving family, was the greatest victory of all.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
It was Saturday evening. The sun had just set, creating a twilight that made it hard to decide whether to turn on headlights. Mark Evans didn't have to decide. He was pulling into his garage on a quiet street in Sharpsburg. A moment later, a slender, dark-haired man emerged from a side door carrying a duffel bag, briefcase, and laptop. Years of experience allowed him to handle the items with ease. He entered his house without calling out to his wife Lisa, knowing she wasn't home. He went to the living room, placing his briefcase and laptop on the couch and his garment bag at the stairs. He hung his coat in the closet by the front door, then removed his jacket and tie, undoing the top buttons of his shirt. He had just returned from a regional meeting of managers at ABC Industries, though he wasn't technically a manager, but the top systems analyst. His supervisor, good at organizing staff but clueless about computer systems, required him at the meeting in Pittsburgh. He had told his wife he'd be back Monday, claiming the meeting was followed by weekend seminars. He had his reasons for this and didn't want to return too early. Regretting not bringing comfortable clothes to the trip, he knew Lisa would have questioned why. Now home, he showered and changed into jeans and a polo shirt. After a quick meal of leftovers and a bottle of beer, he read the local newspaper in the living room, appearing as a husband relaxing after a trip. In reality, he was biding time, dealing with a personal crisis. He'd worked through denial, but still faced anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Past midnight, he cleaned up the kitchen, realizing it was procrastination. Unable to find another solution, he put on a light jacket and headed to the side door. Remembering something, he returned to the living room, sent an email from his laptop, then left the house. After 5 minutes in the garage, he drove away, the garage door closing behind him. At 7:37 a.m., Sharpsburg's emergency operator answered a call. "Emergency? What's your emergency?" A young-sounding female voice responded. "I need the police. I think a crime has been committed." "Where are you located, ma'am?" the operator asked. "I'm at a payphone on Park Drive near George Washington Park," she replied. The operator, understanding the poor connection, asked, "What crime has been committed, ma'am? Were you attacked or robbed?" The young woman hesitated before answering, "No, it wasn't me. I'm fine. I was running through the park on the access road to the picnic areas and saw a car parked there. The doors were open, lights on, and there was a lot of blood." The emergency operator, now very interested, asked, "Will an ambulance be needed? Are there any injuries?" "No, no one was there, just an empty car and blood." A few seconds later, she added, "I didn't look around much. I was scared someone might come after me, so I ran to this payphone to call you." "You did the right thing. A car is on the way and should be there in less than 10 minutes. Please wait for the officers so you can show them the exact location." Alarmed, the caller replied, "No, I'm not waiting. What if they come after me? I'm going home." She then hung up. The emergency operator stared at the screen as the call ended. "Damn it. I hope I didn't divert officers from something more important." Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Detective Peter Nesbitt arrived at the Evans house. A blonde woman pulled into the driveway as he got out of his car. He quickly approached her. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Mrs. Evans." She turned, pulling a suitcase from the car, and replied, "I'm Lisa Evans. Do I know you?" "No, ma'am. I'm Detective Peter Nesbitt from the Sharpsburg Police. We're trying to locate your husband, Mark Evans. His car was found abandoned in George Washington Park this morning." He showed his badge and ID. Lisa looked concerned, but then said, "Mark is in Pittsburgh. He always leaves his car at the airport. You must be mistaken." Detective Nesbitt insisted, "We're sure it's his car. Both the license plate and VIN match his registration." Confused, she walked toward the side door. "If it's his car, it must have been stolen from the airport. I don't know what else to tell you." Nesbitt persisted. "When did you last speak to your husband? Could you call him now to make sure he's in Pittsburgh? Does he have a cell phone you can call?" Lisa stopped, put down her bag, and rummaged through her purse for her phone. "He called me yesterday morning from Pittsburgh. I'll call him now." She dialed his number, but a phone rang in the detective's pocket. He answered, "Hello, Mrs. Evans?" Surprised, she asked, "How did you get Mark's cell phone?" Nesbitt replied, "I can't give it to you. It's evidence in a possible major crime. It was found in your husband's car." Lisa, now more concerned, asked, "Major crime? What do you mean?" "Your husband's car was found with the doors open and a bullet hole. We need to find him to rule him out as a sufferer or suspect. Could you call his hotel in Pittsburgh?" Lisa picked up her briefcase and said, "Sure, the hotel number is in my address book. He always stays at the same Holiday Inn. Come inside and we'll sort this out." Inside the kitchen, she quickly found the number and called the hotel, but after hanging up, she turned to the detective. "Mark's briefcase and laptop are in the living room. I don't understand." The detective, looking thoughtful, called his colleague. "Hi, Dave. It's Pete. I need a search warrant for the Evans house. We need to determine if Mr. Evans is a sufferer or a suspect. Bring it here ASAP. I'll be waiting." He hung up and sat down across from Lisa. "A search warrant? You can search all you want. Just ask. I want you to find my husband." Detective Nesbitt replied, "I need to follow protocol. If your husband is involved in anything illegal, any evidence found without a warrant can't be used in court." Lisa, angry, said, "Illegal? Mark isn't involved in anything illegal. He works with computers." Nesbitt asked, "Why did he come back to town without telling you?" Lisa turned pale and whispered, "Oh no, he can't be." Panicked, she said, "I have no idea why he came home early. All I know is he's not involved in anything illegal." Her panic grew. "Mark could be hurt somewhere. You have to find him." Detective Nesbitt, more gently, said, "We don't know anything for sure yet, Mrs. Evans. I need to do things right. All of our officers are looking for your husband. Why don't you make some coffee while we wait for the warrant?" His sympathetic tone calmed Lisa, and she began to make coffee. However, she tensed again when he said, "While we have coffee, could you tell me how you spent the last 48 hours? We need statements from everyone involved." Nesbitt waited a few minutes before asking for a preliminary statement. They sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee while he described the condition of Mark's car, including the bullet hole and blood. He said the blood suggested a second bullet shot the body, which was lying on firewood next to the car, and that the bullet was being examined. The car was towed for further inspection, and the medical examiner and forensic scientist were still working on the scene. Detective David Klein, Nesbitt's partner, arrived with the search warrant and 2 forensic technicians. They began a thorough search of the Evans home, garage, and car. Nesbitt arranged with Lisa to collect Mark's razor and toothbrush for DNA comparison. Lisa was so distressed that Nesbitt asked her to stay on the couch while they finished the search. After an hour, they decided to take only Mark's briefcase, laptop, and DNA samples. The laptop was password protected. "Mrs. Evans, do you know your husband's laptop password?" Lisa, hopeful to help, said, "It used to be his first and last name and his birth year, Trimark 1971. It should work." None of the variations worked. Nesbitt reassured her, "Our technicians will find a way around it." The items were stored in the forensic van. Nesbitt sat with Lisa to get her statement. "So, Mrs. Evans, I need some basic information about your whereabouts this weekend. Let's start with Saturday morning." Lisa took a deep breath. "Saturday morning, I did chores around the house. Mark called from Pittsburgh around 1 o'clock or 1:30, apologizing for not being home. I went shopping until 4:30, then came home. After dinner, around 7:30, I went to a friend's house and stayed the night. This morning, I got up late, took my time, and got home around 2 o'clock. As she explained, she grew more tense, staring at the floor and clenching her fists. Detective Nesbitt finished writing, closed his notebook, and said, "We might need more details later, Mrs. Evans. This is enough for now, but be ready to provide more if needed." He pocketed his notepad and pen, then stood up to join the others searching the garage and car. Before leaving, he asked, "Do you have any recent full-length photos of your husband? A good headshot would also help. We only have his driver's license photo." He walked to the fireplace, glancing at wedding photos. Lisa quickly fetched a photo album. "Here are some recent photos, Detective. Take your pick." They sat together, and Nesbitt chose a group photo and a headshot of Mark. "These will be perfect." Lisa handed him the photos, and he asked, "Is the man in the photo a relative? If we need a DNA sample, a family member could help if we can't use the razor or toothbrush." Lisa replied, "No, that's Blake Moore, Mark's best friend since elementary school. Mark has no nearby relatives." Nesbitt thanked her and joined the others in the garage. Lisa, looking on the verge of tears, stayed at the kitchen table. Nesbitt felt sympathy for her. Her husband was missing and possibly involved in a serious incident. The fact that she didn't know he was in town added to the mystery. The detectives and forensic experts finished searching the garage and car. They found bloodstains on the gas and brake pedals of Lisa's car, prompting them to tow it for further inspection. As the technicians packed up, the detectives discussed the case. Nesbitt, facing the side door, said to his partner, "What's your opinion of Mrs. Evans? I have my doubts, especially with the blood in her car." His partner replied, "She seemed like a worried wife, but it's hard to tell right now. We shouldn't jump to conclusions." Nesbitt decided, "Let's see her reaction when we tell her about the blood and towing her car." They knocked and entered the kitchen, surprising Lisa, who was on her cell phone. She quickly ended the call. "You're back. I thought you were done." Nesbitt said, "We found blood smears on the pedals of your car. We're towing it for a thorough inspection. I hope you don't mind." Lisa looked shocked. "Blood in my car? I didn't see any blood." Nesbitt replied, "We'll need to know how it got there. If it's related to the park incident, we'll push for answers. Also, we'll need the shoes you wore today." "I haven't been to the park in weeks. I don't understand how there could be blood in my car." She handed him her shoes and then slumped into a chair, covering her face and sobbing. Both detectives realized they needed more information and said goodbye, leaving Lisa slumped on the kitchen chair. "What do you think, Dave? Is she a worried wife or a good actress? Did you notice she was on the phone and hung up quickly?" David Klein shook his head. "I don't know, Pete. She seems sincere, but if the blood in her car is her husband's, she could be involved. We should talk to their friends and neighbors. Maybe someone knows something. She was likely talking to her best friend." "Yeah, digging around might help. I want to know why he came back early. That could be the key." Detective Nesbitt bagged the shoes as evidence. Since they arrived separately, they drove back to the station alone, each trying to make sense of the clues. They spent the rest of their shift on reports. The next morning, Peter and Dave arrived early, eager to dive into the case. They were greeted by forensics and medical examiner reports. It took an hour to read through them. Peter noted, "The reports point in the same direction, but we shouldn't rush. Let's see what else we can find from the computer. Meanwhile, we should talk to his lawyer and colleagues." David agreed, and they visited Mark's lawyer, Robert Graham, who quickly gave them a few minutes of his time. "I can't discuss my client's legal situation. What do you need?" Detective Nesbitt said, "We need confirmation of these emails sent to you from Mark Evans' computer. We want to ensure they're not just drafts." He handed over 4 pages. The lawyer confirmed, "These are originals. I can confirm receipt." The detectives thanked him and headed to their car, exchanging smiles. On their way to ABC Industrial, Peter said, "As you mentioned, the spouse is usually involved, but we have more work to do." At Mark's workplace, they were ushered into his supervisor's office. Detective Klein took the lead. "We're investigating the discovery of Mark Evans's car in George Washington Park. You might have read about it. We have some questions." Mark's boss assured them of his cooperation. "Mark is a valuable employee. What do you need to know?" "First, is Mark supposed to stay in Pittsburgh until Friday night? He reportedly had seminars on Saturday and Sunday. We need to confirm his schedule." Mark's boss quickly responded, "Mark didn't have any events scheduled for the weekend. I expected him back Friday night." Detective Klein noted this and continued, "Have you noticed anything unusual about Mark lately? Anything on his mind?" The boss thought for a moment, then replied, "Mark seemed to have a lot on his mind recently. I asked if he was having any problems, but he said everything was fine. He's been brooding a lot. I assumed he was just working hard." The detectives thanked him and returned to their car, sensing they were making progress. By late morning, they were back at the office and received preliminary DNA results and a forensic report, which included a strange box with wires. With more pieces of the puzzle in place, they reviewed their notes and information in an interrogation room. Confident they had a better understanding, they decided to visit Lisa Evans again. Arriving at the Evans house around 3 p.m., they didn't call ahead to catch her off guard. Lisa seemed startled when she saw them. "Detectives, have you found my husband? I call the sergeant every 2 hours and he has nothing to report." Detective Nesbitt replied, "No, but we've made some progress. We'd like to ask you a few questions." Lisa, looking embarrassed, said, "Sure, come in. I'll do my best to help." In the living room, the detective sat across from her. Detective Klein opened his notebook and asked, "Is there anything you want to tell us about your relationship with Blake Moore?" Lisa turned pale. "What? Blake is my husband's best friend. He's just my friend." Detective Nesbitt asked calmly, "Are you having an affair with Blake Moore?" Lisa, even paler, stammered, "Absolutely not. How can you ask me that?" The detective stood up. Detective Klein said, "We need you to come to the station for a formal statement." Lisa panicked. "What? Am I under arrest? Why do I have to go to the station?" "You're not under arrest yet. We need an official statement. You can have a lawyer if you want." Lisa replied quickly, "I don't need a lawyer. I'll come to the station. I'll do whatever it takes to help find Mark." Lisa escorted the detectives to their car. Once at the station, they led her to a dim interrogation room, designed to create a negative environment. "We'll ask you to wait here while we gather our documents. Are you sure you don't want a lawyer?" Detective Nesbitt gave her another chance to decide. She refused, shaking her head, her blue eyes full of tears. The detective left the room, ensuring the cameras were on. Detective Klein told his commanding officer, "I want a good recording of everything said. I think we're going to solve this case." Peter Nesbitt approached with files. "Let's have a coffee first. Let her have a little time to reflect." The three men agreed and spent 20 minutes in the coffee shop discussing the case and planning the interrogation. Meanwhile, across town, a volunteer at Crime Stoppers answered a call. "Good morning, this is Crime Stoppers. We pay up to $1,000 for tips on solved crimes. This call is being recorded." After a few seconds of silence, an older man spoke. "Can I get money if I help the police?" "It depends on your tip and how it helps the police. Do you have any information about a crime?" There was another pause before the caller said, "Do I get the money right away? What if the police trick me?" "The money isn't from the police, so they won't scam you. Tell me what you know, and I'll give you a code number. You can call back in a few days to see if your tip helped." The man sounded frustrated. "I need the money now. I need juice. If you need food, I can direct you to shelters." "Not food, juice. The kind that costs $5 a bottle." The volunteer smiled but said, "If your tip is good, you could buy a lot of juice." "Okay, I'll wait. I saw someone throw a weapon into the river under the 3rd Street Bridge. It was Sunday morning. He had a rifle and 2 shovels." The volunteer asked, "Was this on the east side of the bridge? Did he throw them in the water?" "Yes, he just threw them off the dock. I can describe him. He was large with blonde hair." "And his car?" "It was dark blue. The license plate started with A's SS, but I forget the rest." The volunteer took down the information and said, "I have everything we need. Your number is 127. Call back in a few days, and we'll let you know if it helped the police." The volunteer relayed the information to the police liaison officer. A diver was sent out within an hour and found the items quickly. The weapon was taken to the crime lab, where it matched a recent crime scene in George Washington Park. A report was sent to the detectives, and a technician retrieved the 2 shovels from the property clerk. As the detectives left the coffee shop, they were met by a clerk delivering the ballistics and Crime Stoppers reports. "Detectives, we have the weapon used in the George Washington Park shooting. The attached report might lead you to the perpetrator." The clerk handed over the reports. Klein and Nesbitt reviewed the reports, then called up vehicle records on a computer. "Pete, let's split up. I'll question our guest in the interrogation room, and you can get a uniformed officer to bring in Mr. Moore for questioning." "Sounds like a plan, Dave. Things are coming together nicely." Detective Klein gathered the reports and headed to the interrogation room where Lisa Evans was waiting. Meanwhile, his partner arranged for a uniformed officer to visit Blake Moore's house. Soon they were on their way. In the interview room, Lisa sat calmly, showing no fear or sadness. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Mrs. Evans. This room is monitored and recorded," Detective Klein said. She replied, "I don't mind. I have nothing to hide." Klein responded, "Good. Let's get started. Are you having an affair with Blake Moore? Yes or no?" Lisa's shoulders slumped and she looked away. "Yes," she whispered. Klein showed her papers from Mark's laptop. "We have proof of your affair. Your husband knew. He sent these to his attorney, planning a divorce on grounds of infidelity. This map shows your visits to Moore's house. Lisa looked shocked. How did Mark know? Klein held up a small device. He installed this tracker in your car, monitoring your location in real time. She stared at the device. Mark knew for weeks, and he wanted a divorce? She began to cry. Klein continued. Mark documented your interactions with Moore. The last map was from Saturday night when he went missing. He emailed his lawyer saying he was going to confront you and feared he might get arrested. Lisa said, but Mark never showed up at Blake's. I spent the night there. Klein replied, preliminary DNA results show the blood in the park is his. We found the weapon used, linked to your lover. The question is how long you'll cover it up. Lisa insisted, Blake didn't do anything to Mark. We were together all night. Klein added, we also found your husband's blood in your car and on your shoes. My partner is picking up Mr. Moore now. Whoever tells us what happened and where to find Mark's body will get a better deal. Lisa was silent, visibly shaken, as Klein gathered the papers and waited for her response. Detective Klein handed Lisa the blood test reports, but she barely glanced at them. Mark can't be dead. I love him. I need him, she sobbed, clearly very upset. Blake will tell you the same. If Mark got hurt in the park, we had nothing to do with it. She cried into a crumpled, wet handkerchief. Detective Klein gave her a few minutes to regain composure. When she seemed calmer, he said, there is no doubt your husband is dead. The medical examiner concluded there's over a 95% chance based on blood loss and the lack of treatment at any facility in the county. He handed her the report and photos of the scene. Seeing the bloody photos, she burst into tears again. I'll leave you alone for a few minutes to think. You're not helping yourself by denying responsibility. Klein left the room, placed the reports on his desk, and shook his head as he passed his commanding officer. He headed to the break room for coffee, while his commander monitored Lisa on the interrogation room camera. Detective Nesbitt, thinking about the case, drove to Blake Moore's house, meeting a patrol car there. Nesbitt was almost surprised when Blake Moore answered the door promptly. Yes, officers. How can I help you? Moore asked, seeing the police. Detective Nesbitt introduced himself. I'm Detective Nesbitt, here about Mark Evans' disappearance. We need you at the station for questioning. Mrs. Evans is there now, and we have questions that require your input. Moore asked, Am I under arrest? I know Mark is missing, but I don't know how I can help. We have questions you might help answer. Please come with us. You're not under arrest. Moore, too stunned to resist, joined them in the unmarked car. He sat in the back, complying with department protocol. Detective Nesbitt turned to his partner. Let's head to the station. On the way, Nesbitt asked Moore, How well do you know Mrs. Evans? She's just Mark's wife to me. Why do you ask? Moore replied. Just wondering. What do you do, Mr. Moore? I run a landscaping company, Moore's Landscaping. We do a lot of commercial work, even for the city, Moore said, relaxing a bit. At the station, Moore was placed in an interrogation room next to Lisa's. Detective Nesbitt gathered Klein's folders and began questioning Moore. Initially, Moore denied the affair, but evidence from emails and surveillance reports made him confess. He admitted the affair lasted almost 4 months, but insisted neither of them injured Mark, and that they didn't leave his house the night Mark disappeared. As Nesbitt pressed him, Moore suggested a new theory. If Mark found out about us, he might have gone into a rage or even hired someone to make it look like we were involved. He and I have history. Nesbitt countered, We have the weapon used. A witness described you and your car, and provided most of your license plate number. Don't try to claim Mark framed you with an elaborate self-destruction. Blake Moore became agitated and said, You don't know Mark. We've been best friends since elementary school, but I've learned not to mess with his girlfriends or his wife. In high school, I dated one of his girlfriends behind his back. When he found out, he scared me, even though I'm bigger and stronger. He warned me he'd liquidate me if I did it again. The detective, slightly amused, replied, So, you were scared of him, but still had an affair with his wife? Blake, calming down, said, I couldn't resist her. It built up over the years, and a few months ago I made a move. We've been seeing each other since. I can't believe he found out. We were so careful. The detective sifted through reports. Affairs often lead to homicide. I think you and Lisa planned this. You can either come clean or face the maximum penalty. Your choice. Blake insisted. We had nothing to do with it. If Mark found out, he might have done something drastic. Maybe he set us up. Detective Nesbitt said, We have enough to search your home, car, and office. Confess now for leniency. Use your head, Blake. Blake, outraged, said, "I didn't hurt Mark. Maybe Lisa did something, but I don't know about it." The detective picked up his papers and left the room, saying, "When criminals work together, one always tries to blame the other. You won't be leaving anytime soon." Outside, Detective Nesbitt found his partner with another report. "The shovels found in the river are from Moore's Landscaping. These guys think we won't find out." Later, the detectives presented their evidence to the district attorney. Despite lacking a body, the evidence was strong enough to press charges. Half an hour later, Lisa Evans and Blake Moore were charged with Mark Evans' homicide. They proclaimed their innocence as their Miranda rights were read. After the arraignment, Lisa and Blake were fingerprinted and photographed, neither needing to be told not to smile. As they were led back to their cells, they spoke for the first time since being charged. "What are we going to do, Blake? They can't believe we did anything to Mark, can they?" Lisa asked, still sniffing. "We need our own lawyers, or maybe share one to save money since we're accused of the same thing. But this is all wrong. I think Mark set us up," Blake said, frustrated. "You can't believe that, can you? Why would Mark go to such extremes?" Lisa asked, shocked. "I don't think you knew Mark as well as you thought. I'm amazed he didn't do something drastic when he found out about us. If I thought he'd find out, I wouldn't have touched you," Blake replied, shaking his head. Blake told Lisa about a past incident when he had secretly dated Mark's girlfriend. Standing by the cell bars, separated by a concrete wall, they could easily talk. "I don't believe Mark would do this. I don't even know how he found out. We were always careful and only met when he was out of town," Lisa said thoughtfully. "I regret betraying him. Even if he's not dead, I want a divorce," she added, her voice trailing off with emotion. Blake listened to her sobs and said, "Lisa, stop it. You knew the risks when you came to my house. You were aware of the consequences." She quieted down and said softly, "You're right. I just hope he forgives me." After a pause, Lisa suggested, "I could call Robert Graham, our attorney. Maybe he can represent both of us and split the costs." They agreed, and Lisa got an officer's attention to make a call. However, Robert Graham declined due to his involvement in Mark's divorce proceedings, recommending his colleague Basil Smith instead. Lisa agreed, and Smith was on his way. Blake was pleased to hear this and thanked Lisa. They waited in their cells until Basil Smith, a seasoned lawyer, arrived. The introductions were brief, and Smith reviewed the charges. "So, you're both charged with Mark Evans' homicide. What did the officers tell you?" Smith asked. "Mrs. Evans, you first. Just the main points." Lisa recounted her story, ending in tears. "I had nothing to do with it. I love Mark. I couldn't hurt him." Smith then turned to Blake. "Your turn, briefly." Blake summarized his experience, asserting, "We had nothing to do with Mark's disappearance. I think Mark organized this to frame us." Smith, sensing the urgency, said, "We need to focus on getting you both out of here. Bail will likely be set at $100,000 each. Will that be a problem?" Lisa, shocked, asked, "Do I need $100,000 for bail?" "No, just 10% or $10,000 cash for the bail bond," Smith reassured her. They agreed they could manage bail and were eager to be released. Smith informed them, "You'll be arraigned tomorrow morning. Bail will be set then, and you'll make arrangements to get out. Prepare to spend the night here." Both clients reacted badly to the lawyer's statement. He explained he couldn't do more until charges were filed. Once they were out, he would talk to the district attorney to unseal the evidence and better understand their case. They were taken back to their cells, where neither slept well, given greasy takeout food, a single blanket, and loud cellmates. The next morning at 10 o'clock, they met with their attorney before court. Despite their disheveled appearance, they entered their pleas of not guilty, and bail was set at $100,000. Blake, owning a home and business, quickly negotiated a $10,000 bond and was released by early afternoon. Lisa was less fortunate. Without sole ownership of her home and finding her savings account empty, she had to call her parents for help. After much persuasion, they agreed to provide the $10,000. However, the delay meant she spent another night in jail, this time with 2 tipsy courtesans. The next day, after the financial matters were resolved, she was released, went home, showered, and ignored incoming calls. The next month passed quickly. Lisa learned that Mark had withdrawn the money from their account to protect his share before their divorce. She received the divorce papers without knowing what he did with the cash. Lisa and Blake met with Basil Smith several times. Smith received copies of the evidence and planned to meet with the district attorney to get the charges dismissed, arguing the difficulty of obtaining a conviction without a body or witness. He suggested hiring a private investigator to explore if Mark had orchestrated his own disappearance. Blake agreed, but Lisa believed Mark was a sufferer of a botched carjacking. Over the next few weeks, the investigator found nothing. He tried to find the tipster who reported the discarded rifle and shovels, but no one recognized the voice from the call. The tipster never followed up, adding to the mystery. Meanwhile, tensions between Lisa and Blake grew. After his release, Blake suggested they continue their affair. Lisa refused, blaming him for her situation. "I want nothing to do with you except our court case," she said, often crying. Blake's response was cold. "Suit yourself, Lisa. You're not the only woman in town." They only spoke in the company of their lawyer, keeping their distance otherwise. Their affair had turned icy cold. A month after their release, Basil Smith arranged a meeting with District Attorney Jeff Bagden. Lisa and Blake hoped the charges would be dropped, as they had been molestated with questions about their relationship. They screened calls using caller ID and answering machines, eager to clear their names and move on. Jeff Bagden, surprisingly young and stylish, began, "I just received final reports from the medical examiner and police. Based on the evidence, I'm offering a reduced sentence of 8 to 12 years for a guilty plea to second-degree homicide." Lisa and Blake were shocked, loudly proclaiming their innocence. Their attorney, trying to calm them, asked how Bagden justified the offer. Bagden explained, "We have new evidence. DNA from blood on your car's license plate and trunk gasket matches Mark Evans. Additionally, black polyethylene found under Mark's car matches material from your landscaping business." Lisa angrily accused, "Blake, what have you done?" Blake exploded, "You know I had nothing to do with it. You were with me when it happened." Basil Smith intervened, calming them both. He addressed Bagden. "Excuse my clients, we hoped the charges would be dropped and your statement caught them off guard." Bagden, amused, replied, "I understand, but we have enough evidence to go to trial. The medical examiner's report confirms the sufferer lost too much blood to survive. The crime scene suggests the body was dragged and loaded into a car. The prosecution is confident." Bagden handed over the reports and left. Lisa and Blake hurriedly talked to Smith, who told them to be quiet. He said, "I know you're shocked. Don't fight each other. We need to figure out a defense. Do you want to reject the plea deal?" Both refused the deal, convinced they wouldn't be convicted. Smith agreed to prepare for trial. After they left, Smith reviewed the reports, questioning whether his clients were truthful. Despite his doubts, he was committed to defending them. Months later, the trial began. Judge Robert Cox took his seat at 10 a.m. on Monday. Basil Smith sat between Lisa and Blake to manage their tension. He had considered suggesting separate lawyers, but they couldn't afford it. Blake's business was struggling, and Lisa had quit her job due to the stress of the trial and difficulties with her missing husband's friends. District Attorney Jeff Bagden began his opening statement directly. "Members of the jury, we do not have Mark Evans' body, but we intend to prove he is dead and that the defendants are guilty of his homicide." He revealed that the defendants had an affair, which Mark Evans discovered, leading him to file for divorce. Although it was unclear how or when Mark found out, traces on his computer showed he knew when and where they met. Emails documented his tracking efforts, financial preparations for divorce, and his intention to confront them. "We cannot pinpoint when they met, but we know the results. Evidence suggests they met at Mr. Moore's residence, where Mr. Evans was incapacitated, placed in the passenger seat, and driven to George Washington Park. There, he was shot in the upper chest while likely unconscious. He was dragged from the car, thrown to the ground, and shot again, this time striking his carotid artery. Graphic photos will show his final moments." At this point, Lisa Evans lost her composure, requiring Judge Cox's intervention to restore order. Bagden continued, "After the second shot, Mr. Evans was wrapped in plastic, dragged from the site, and loaded into Mr. Moore's trunk. He was driven to an unknown location and buried. The homicide weapon and shovels were dumped in the river, but a concerned citizen reported this, leading police to recover them. Forensic analysis confirmed the defendant's presence at the crime scene. Mr. Evans' blood was found on Mr. Moore's car and on Lisa Evans' shoes." Bagden concluded, "The defense will claim they were not at the scene, relying on each other's alibis. I am confident you will see through this and find them guilty." Basil Smith countered, emphasizing the presumption of innocence and urging the jury to focus on the evidence. Despite his efforts, the district attorney's statement had a strong impact. The first witness, a computer expert, testified about the emails and maps Mark Evans used to track his wife's meetings with Mr. Moore. The tracking device, described in Mark's letter to his counsel, accurately logged locations and times. This evidence embarrassed Lisa Evans, while Blake Moore appeared bored. Smith's cross-examination yielded little, as the device and emails were indisputable. Reporters took notes, especially about the tracking device, anticipating interest from their readers. After an extended lunch break, the trial resumed with testimony from the emergency operator and 2 patrolmen who first responded. They provided basic, drama-free facts about discovering Mark Evans's car. The trial's intensity rose when detectives and medical examiners described the crime scene, supported by large graphic photographs showing bullet holes, blood, and drag marks. The medical examiner detailed the blood loss, estimating 3 to 4 pints, and described blood jets indicating a severed artery. He concluded that Mark Evans was dying when Lisa Evans lost control and screamed, "No, Mark can't be dead." Her outburst forced the judge to adjourn the trial until the next morning. The second day began with the medical expert continuing his testimony, focusing on blood sample tests. After 15 minutes, DA Jeff Bagden ended his questioning, turning the witness over to defense attorney Basil Smith. Smith checked that Lisa Evans, now sedated, was calm. He aimed to refute the graphic, execution-like impression of the shooting. Smith asked, "You estimated Mark Evans lost 3 to 4 pints of blood, but isn't it possible it was 1 to 2 pints depending on blood distribution?" The medical examiner replied, "It's unlikely, but not impossible." Smith continued, "Could first aid have lessened the fatality of Mark Evans' injury?" The examiner said, "Unlikely, but not impossible. Immediate medical attention would have been required." Smith highlighted the lack of evidence for immediate assistance and dismissed the witness, having secured small concessions. Next, a forensic scientist specializing in weapons and ammunition testified about 2 recovered bullets. One bullet from the car seat was deformed. The other, from firewood, was in good condition and matched the recovered weapon. Smith asked, "Were the bullets checked for bone or flesh remnants?" The technician confirmed minimal traces of blood on the bullets, explaining that passing through layers of padding and fabric likely cleaned them. He noted the bullets had a full metal jacket, typical for military use, with a gilding metal copper-steel jacket around the core. He explained that this jacket is stronger than a standard all-metal jacket, usually made of copper. This was both good and bad for the defense. While there was no evidence the bullets passed through the body, the circumstances and type of bullet explained the situation. The hope of tracing the weapon was futile. It was sold at a weapons show 20 years ago with no buyer record. Basil Smith did confirm no fingerprints or DNA from the defendants were found on the weapon or casings. Anything not washed away by river water was wiped clean before disposal. Another technician discussed the shovels found. There were no fingerprints or DNA, but they were branded Moore's Landscaping. 14 identical shovels were found at Moore's business. Cross-examination yielded no new information. Witnesses from the Forensic Science Department and police continued all morning and afternoon. Basil Smith's most significant cross-examination occurred with a technician who found blood in Blake Moore's car. The technician admitted the blood could have been planted by a third party, giving Smith a small victory. Things complicated with testimony from the technician at Lisa Evans's home. Blood was found in her car and on her right shoe. Although the technician admitted they couldn't determine if the blood was transferred from the shoe to the gas pedal or vice versa, the lawyer hoped this doubt would help Lisa. As the prosecution's witnesses concluded, the third morning began with the defense's evidence presentation. Local newspapers speculated that the defense would struggle against the prosecution's evidence. They suggested that without a body, a conviction would be difficult, especially given the defense's strategy of casting doubt on whether Mark Evans was really dead. Basil Smith's first defense witness was blood analysis expert Dr. Wilbur. He testified, "A better job could have been done collecting blood evidence. Properly analyzing blood-soaked soil could have given a more accurate estimate of blood loss." He believed as little as 1.5 pints of blood could have created the scene, and someone losing that much blood could still be alive. The district attorney did not cross-examine him. Next, Blake Moore testified, claiming innocence and suggesting Mark orchestrated his own homicide. He stated he never owned a weapon, and the shovels found could have been stolen from his work sites. Basil Smith kept the testimony brief, turning Moore over for cross-examination. Jeff Bagden asked, "Why do you think Mark Evans would organize his own homicide?" Blake recounted how Mark had threatened him in high school after Blake dated Mark's girlfriend behind his back. Bagden then asked, "So, this isn't the first time you interfered with Mark Evans's relationships. Don't you think if he wanted to destroy someone, he would have chosen you?" Blake Moore couldn't directly answer the question, muttering that his physical advantage over Mark would have prevented a confrontation. "So, you think you could intimidate your friend into taking his own life? Is that why you felt comfortable taking his wife?" the prosecutor asked, then continued without waiting for an answer. "Your actions show you're a narcissist who thinks he can have any woman and disregard friendship." Basil Smith objected, arguing the prosecutor was testifying rather than asking questions. The judge agreed and instructed the jury to disregard the prosecutor's last statement. Despite this, Blake was visibly upset but left the stand without further comment. Basil Smith realized Blake's testimony had backfired, but hoped Lisa's testimony might help. Lisa, more composed, emphatically stated she wasn't involved in any attack on her husband and suggested he might have been carjacked. Basil chose not to ask additional questions. The prosecutor asked Lisa, "Where were you between midnight Saturday and 2 p.m. Sunday?" Lisa, embarrassed, replied, "I was with Blake Moore at his house from 8 p.m. Saturday until about 1:30 p.m. Sunday." "You didn't quite answer the question. Tell us what you did from midnight Saturday to Sunday." Lisa, flustered, said, "I was in Blake's bedroom at midnight. We were, doing it." "And how long did this last?" the prosecutor pressed. "Probably until after 1 a.m., Lisa admitted, embarrassed. "Then what?" he asked. "We slept until about 5:45 a.m., she said. "Was Mr. Moore in bed when you woke up?" "Yes, he was there. We got busy again and went back to sleep around 6:30, then got up at 11 a.m., Lisa said quickly. "So you woke him up to do it again at 6:30? the prosecutor clarified. Lisa, embarrassed, replied, "No, he was already ready." The prosecutor, seeing the jury's reaction, continued, "Tell us exactly how you woke him up." Lisa, resigned, said, "I just started doing it with him." The prosecutor moved in for the final blow. "You said you love your husband. Is that true?" After Lisa's emphatic "yes," he continued, "you spent the night with his best friend while he took his life. How can we believe you weren't involved in his end of life?" Lisa cried quietly, unable to answer. Judge Cox ended her suffering by asking if there were any more questions. When there were none, the judge announced a lunch recess. After Lisa composed herself, she joined her attorney, Basil Smith, for a somber lunch. The experienced attorney warned them the case could go either way. Privately, he was pessimistic since both clients had faltered on the witness stand. The afternoon session ended quickly as Smith announced there were no more defense witnesses. Both attorneys prepared their closing statements. The prosecutor emphasized the overwhelming evidence against the defendants, while the defense stressed the circumstantial nature of the case, the absence of a body, and the lack of a clear motive. The case went to the jury by 4 p.m., and they deliberated for 2 hours before retiring for the night. The next morning, Lisa and Blake waited at Basil Smith's office for the jury's verdict. Sharing a conference room, they put aside their differences, hoping for acquittal. By 3:30 p.m., the call came. The jury had reached a verdict. Lisa's parents, who had come to town for the trial, were present at the courthouse. The verdict was announced quickly: guilty of second-degree homicide. Lisa burst into tears, and Blake pounded his fist in frustration. They were handcuffed and taken into custody, with Lisa having a brief moment to speak to her parents, proclaiming her innocence. The week between conviction and sentencing passed slowly. Lisa's parents visited daily, while Blake received one visit from a cousin. At sentencing, both received 15 years to life. Basil Smith promised to review the court records for a possible appeal. Within 3 days, they were transferred to state prison. Lisa's prison had a good reputation, but Blake's had a history of riots. With the trial over, media coverage ceased, and Lisa Evans and Blake Moore faded from public attention. A couple of months later, Basil Smith and Jeff Bagden met for a drink. Reflecting on the case, Smith expressed surprise at the convictions, believing the defendants' consistent stories suggested innocence. Bagden replied, "The jury didn't believe them. I try not to take these cases personally unless they involve particularly heinous crimes or children. This case wasn't the worst, but it didn't generate much sympathy for the defendants." A year later, a news item reported a major disturbance at Blake Moore's prison. Blake had been stabbed during the riot and transferred to the hospital with a collapsed lung. He was in serious condition but expected to survive. 18 months after Lisa Evans and Blake Moore were convicted of Mark Evans' homicide, Basil Smith rarely thought about the case. He had spent the first year reviewing transcripts, but found no legal grounds for appeal. One quiet Wednesday morning at the New York office of the Innocence Project, the receptionist received a FedEx package. Inside were a DVD, a sealed biohazard bag, and a multi-page letter. Intrigued, she called Tony Kelly, a a young lawyer, to look at it. Tony, dressed casually, took the package to his office. He had been with the Innocence Project for a year, doing legal research. He enjoyed helping those wrongfully convicted. Sitting at his desk, he read the letter. The letter, addressed to the Innocence Project, began, "Regarding the convictions of Lisa Evans and Blake Moore, I don't know where to begin, so I'll start at the beginning. My name is not important, but the information I have could change the lives of the 2 convicted and 5 others, including me. About 15 months ago, a man responded to my ad for a computer-literate person. He knew as much, if not more, about business networks than I did. I hired him immediately. This man, whom I'll call Mark, was quiet but exceptionally skilled. Within 2 months, my business grew by 50% due to his efforts and long hours. When Mark started working for me, he had just arrived in town and hadn't rented a place yet. My business was new, so I rented him our basement room for extra income. I wanted to reinvest profits into the business to support me and my young son. Though a risk, something about Mark convinced me he was no threat. We quickly settled into a routine. For the first 3 months, he lived in the basement but ate with us and commuted together. He often worked extra hours without pay, preferring productivity over TV or sleep. Over time, our relationship evolved from employer-employee to friends and eventually into a loving family. My son now calls him Dad. From the start, I sensed something deeply troubled Mark. One quiet afternoon, I locked the office door and called him in, determined to find out what was bothering him. He eventually confessed he was running from a failed marriage. His wife had betrayed him with a good friend, and he nearly committed homicide self-destruction because of it. Our conversation helped him overcome his past. We started dating on weekends, maintaining separate roles during the week. After a month, he moved from the basement into my bedroom, and we became a family. Despite this, I felt he was still hiding something. Our relationship grew stronger, and Mark became a father figure to my son, who needs a loving dad. 4 days ago, Mark collapsed at work and was diagnosed with a heart condition requiring surgery. Once stabilized, he was moved to a private room where he shared his story, afraid it would die with him if he didn't survive the surgery. He told me this over the course of a day. Once I agreed to share his story with you, he seemed relieved. Now, as he sleeps, I'm typing this letter with our son asleep beside him. I need to finish this tonight, create a DVD, and send everything to you by noon tomorrow, ensuring it can't be traced back to us. Mark's story began almost 2 years ago. He was happily married to Lisa for nearly 6 years when he noticed a small bruise on her right bosom. Initially thinking it was from bumping into furniture, he realized it looked more like a love bite. Knowing it wasn't from him, he spent the night troubled by various scenarios of how the bruise got there. These thoughts stayed with him the next day at work. By the time he got to his office, he felt foolish for his suspicions. He had no evidence of wrongdoing and thought it was all circumstantial. Just before lunch, the parts delivery manager brought him a tracking device to evaluate for improving the delivery service. Mark quickly decided how to test it. 3 days after installing the device in his wife's car, he checked the monitor while at work. She had said she was going shopping, but the tracker showed she went to Blake Moore's house. An hour later, her car was still there. Suspicious, he called her. When she said she was shopping, he knew something was wrong. That evening, he listened to her false story about shopping, feeling sick, but deciding not to jump to conclusions. He observed her for another week while on a business trip, tracking her car through 3 states to Blake's house from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. She lied about being home the entire night. The confirmation of her infidelity devastated him. When he returned, he considered destruction. He knew Blake was a ladies' man, but never thought he'd pursue Lisa. Her betrayal broke his heart. That night, he visited the elderly widow next door under the pretense of borrowing a wrench. He retrieved a hidden revolver from her late husband's toolbox. Mark intended to use it to eliminate Blake and Lisa, then himself. He decided to wait until he caught them together. He ordered his own tracking device to return the one he was evaluating. Luckily, Lisa and Blake didn't meet for another week, giving Mark time to rethink. In those days, he devised a better plan: to frame them for homicide. He spent a week planning and gathering supplies. When ready, he claimed a weekend business trip, knowing they'd meet while he was away. When his wife went to Blake's, he set his plan in motion, creating a paper trail suggesting he was divorcing her. He almost forgot to send a crucial email to his lawyer that would implicate Lisa and Blake. Before leaving, he fired a bullet into his car's passenger seat and another into a wooden block, muffling the shots with a blanket in the garage. This step felt like a relief, marking the start of his revenge. You should look for archived newspaper articles online. Mark followed the trial daily and said most of the story was documented by court reporters. He thinks a complete review of the court transcript will clarify everything. First, he drove his car to a park near Blake's house and found a secluded spot. He had a large gym bag with all the materials for his plan. He spread everything out on a picnic table, covering it with an old blanket. He unloaded firewood, plastic sheeting, and a spare tire, creating a drag trail to the paved road, then returned the tire to the trunk and spread the firewood around. Using a small flashlight, he did all this and then sat quietly to see if anyone noticed. Mark drew blood from his hand using a needle, collecting nearly 2 pints, which he diluted with distilled water. He sprayed this blood in patterns to mimic an arterial jet and smeared it on the car seat and ground to suggest a significant blood loss. He filled bullet holes in the firewood and car upholstery with more blood. After finishing, he packed everything in his gym bag and left the park, reaching an old car he had bought for the purpose. Dizzy from blood loss, he rested until nearly 6 a.m., then drove to Blake's house to finish his plan. Lisa's car was still at Blake's house and unlocked, so he put a couple of drops of blood on the gas pedal. He also smeared blood on Blake's car but got scared when he saw a light on in Blake's bedroom. He quickly left, went to a payphone, and used a voice changer to report his car in the park, pretending to be a woman. He then disposed of 2 shovels and the revolver in the river. Exhausted, he stayed in a motel for 2 days, taking supplements and eating energy bars. He made another call with the voice changer, this time as an old man, which helped the police find the revolver. Mark told me this whole story because he wants to leave his past as Mark Evans behind. He now uses a different identity, which my son and I know him by, and wants to keep it. He asked me to send this information to help overturn the convictions of Lisa Evans and Blake Moore. Tomorrow I'll pick up a copy of the New York Times and an inkwell. We'll use part of the front page to put all of Mark's fingerprints in a bloodstain, which will match the DNA from the park, proving he's alive. This should be enough to free them from jail. At the end of the letter, there was a handwritten note. Mark came out of surgery in good condition. He wants me to fly to Seattle tomorrow to send this package. I hate to leave him, but it will ease his mind. We're expecting twins in about 3 months. Tony Kelly turned the last page to check for any additional notes, but it was blank. He put his feet down from the desk and examined the other items in the package. The DVD was labeled Photos Taken in George Washington Park, and the black plastic envelope was marked Fingerprints and DNA. He reviewed the printed pages again for any extra notes and then called a senior attorney. This was beyond his ability to handle alone. It didn't take long to confirm that the DNA belonged to Mark Evans, and the fingerprints matched those from his car found in the park, proving he was still alive. With undeniable evidence that 2 people were convicted of a homicide that never happened, the state attorney general and governor expedited their release. A week later, they returned to the courtroom with Basil Smith, Lisa's parents, and even District Attorney Jeff Bagden. With some state representatives present, the state attorney general apologized for the wrongful conviction. He blamed Mark Evans for misleading the justice system and announced efforts to find him and hold him accountable for the financial costs incurred. When asked where they would start looking for Mark, he could only shake his head. Blake Moore seemed changed, no longer arrogant but more inclined to compromise. He apologized to Lisa for the events leading to their imprisonment. Lisa appeared indifferent, longing only to leave with her parents. Both Basil Smith and the district attorney apologized, acknowledging they had been misled by Mark Evans. They vowed to be more diligent in future cases. Although the state found no liability, Lisa and Blake received $50,000 each in compensation. Blake, whose business went bankrupt and house was sold for legal fees, left town. He commented to Lisa that Mark had severely wronged them and the check was a mere fraction of what he lost. Lisa, visibly worn from her ordeal, simply said they deserved it and left without saying goodbye. 2 weeks after cable news reported their release, a large envelope arrived at Basil Smith's office. Inside was a note for the attorney and a sealed envelope for Lisa. Basil delivered the letter to Lisa at her apartment. After a brief conversation, he left her with the envelope, which she opened with apprehension. Recognizing Mark's handwriting, she read the letter. Lisa, I apologize for the time you spent in jail. Your betrayal with Blake drove me nearly insane. My new life and happiness have shown me that freeing you both was necessary for my own freedom. I know authorities will search for me, but I am confident in my new life with my new family. Good luck and goodbye. M. The letter slipped from her hand, shattering any remaining hope of reconciliation with Mark.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
The 12-hour flight to Thailand was wearing on me, and with another 12 hours to go, the cramped economy seat felt more like a torture chamber with every passing minute. Fatigue was setting in, but it was accompanied by a buzz of excitement. I was on my way to becoming an expatriate, or expat, as they're called in Thailand. 2 years after my divorce, I had finally cashed in my chips. I took my share of the house equity, half the savings, and a secret nest egg my ex-wife never knew about, and set course for the land of smiles, planning to settle there for good. With my resources, I could enjoy a comfortable retirement. Eventually, when I became eligible to tap into my 401k, I'd have even more financial freedom. My ex had tried to claim a share of that, but I reminded her that I had enough evidence of her infidelity to send to everyone we knew, including her parents. That was enough for her to back down. Sometimes I think about sending it anyway, just out of spite. My feelings for her have boiled down to pure hatred for the betrayal and destruction she brought into my life. In the end, the divorce was relatively smooth. We went with irreconcilable differences rather than adultery, though she deserved to have her actions laid bare. I wasn't interested in wasting my energy on revenge. I just wanted to move on and escape as far as possible from the memories and the pain. I had been to Thailand 20 years earlier when I was in the service. I liked the food, weather, and the women, so I decided to begin my new life there. I needed the change. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Things had to be a lot different there after all these years. I certainly was not the same man. The wounds from too many battles left me tired and scarred. I figured whatever fate awaited me had to be better than the hellish loneliness that I left behind. My name is Arthur Lee Allen. I know what you're thinking. It's not my fault. My mother was a big fan of American Western history, especially gunslingers, hence the name. I kind of liked it. In Thailand, the name would hold no special meaning. Everything would be new there. I would be a stranger in a very strange land. I had nothing to lose. My son, who rarely spoke to me, was about to finish college. The only women I was able to date back in New York were divorced, overweight, bitter, and carrying more baggage than a freight train. At 49, I was in pretty good shape with a touch of gray in my hair. I was often told that I didn't look a day over 35. I certainly wasn't ready to pack it in. Since there wasn't a lot of sex going on for me after the divorce, the gym became my sanctuary. My abs are flat and my muscles hard. I was never much of a ladies' man, shy, I guess. Some ego reinforcement and a chance to regroup were badly needed. I yearned to feel manly again and in control of my life. "You look deep in thought, young man," said the man sitting directly to my right. I hadn't said much to him during the trip. He looked to be about 60-something. His face showed the wisdom of a life hard lived. He seemed to sense my mood. I just left my entire life back in the States. I sure hope I'm doing the right thing. "You'll be fine, son," he said, smiling. "I'm Gary Francis," he said, extending his hand. He had the quiet bearing of a man who knew what he was talking about. "I'm Arthur Lee Allen. Pleased to meet you," I answered, reading his mind. He didn't comment on the name. The old man looked glad for the company. "Glad to meet you, Arthur. I've lived in Thailand 22 years. I have often thought of moving back to the States, but I never will. I will spend my last days in Thailand. I guess you could say I'm a battle-hardened old veteran of the game." I thought of him as the old man in the military sense of using the term to describe a respected commanding officer. "Game? What game?" I said, now intrigued. He looked at me with the patience of a wise and seasoned teacher. The use of the word son drew me to him. For some reason, I trusted him immediately. "You will experience some of the most selfless acts of kindness and generosity imaginable, as well as considerable lies, deceit, and manipulation for the purpose of separating you from your cash. It's the way it is, their way of life. You are about to enter a world of fantasy, son. For them, it's about survival. Pensions and social security are not the rule there. For most Thais, there is no safety net. The object of the game is to survive their world with your wallet, integrity, and pride intact while having as much fun as possible. Many a man has checked his brain at the airport and lived to regret it." He shared with me much of what he had learned. I felt like I should be taking notes. I paid real close attention to his words. I suddenly started to feel overwhelmed and anxious. "You've got to understand that the rules will be different when you leave this plane." "What are the rules?" "Well, to start with, you have never seen so many available beautiful young women. Smile, and they will treat you better than you could ever imagine. Many will try to train you, then exploit you. It can be difficult to sort out what is real. Believe half of what you see and nothing of what you hear. For example, the lady boys are some of the most beautiful women you will see. The Thais call them katois. Ladyboys? Is that like gay? I asked, innocently. More than gay, they are pre-op and post-op transsexuals. Some of them are truly amazing. It's all an illusion. Much of what you think you see will be an illusion. That's just the beginning. The famous Thai smile is both a sword and a shield. It doesn't mean the same thing as a smile back home. If they smile, you smile. It's also your sword and shield. You will learn as you go along. Just remember, don't surrender your power and make yourself happy. It's time in your life to think about your needs. Compromise is okay, but don't sacrifice too much. Stay in control, stay strong. Set limits and see with your eyes and brain, not your little willy. If something doesn't feel correct, it probably isn't. Thai women have no respect for a chicken, so don't allow that to happen. Why would I do that? In Thailand, it's easier than you would think. A guy like you is a ripe target. You want companionship and sex. They want money. You are not the predator in the land of smiles. You're the prey. They will strip your wallet and heart to the bone and laugh at you for being stupid enough to let them. I struggled to absorb all of what he said. One more thing. Feel free to fall in love. That is with a different lady every day. We expats call them LBFMs. What's that? Little brown sex machines, Gary answered, smiling as his mind flashed back to another place and time. Most of the ladies of the night are not wife material. They are prostitutes. Some idiots call them sex workers. If she sells sex for a living, she's a prostitute. If she's been in the game longer than a month or two, forget about it. She's damaged goods. Don't forget that. Treat them with respect, pay them in the morning, and send them on their way. Their jealousy and possessiveness are based on ownership of clients, not love. It looks like affection or love, but that's not what it is. Play with them, as they are most certainly are playing with you. And don't put up with any shit. If she starts to throw things or get violent, put her out. That's how you play the game, son. Is that all I have to look forward to? Don't get me wrong. If you find a so-called good girl, you might find a woman that would make an excellent life companion. Look for them in areas away from where Farang usually go. However, their family and friends will usually have higher priority than you. If you are real lucky, you might find one that thinks more like a girl back home. Ironically, it's their exotic nature that's so appealing. At the same time, it's like dealing with creatures from another planet. Beware, my friend. Many good girls have adopted the tactics of their more unscrupulous sisters. Learn some Thai. If you don't let them know that you understand their conversations, you'll learn a lot. Farang. It means foreigner. Often it is used negatively by Thais. You will never be totally accepted by Thai society. You and I will always be foreigners. Yours odds improve if she is educated and older than 30. The young girls are just too full of themselves. Most of them don't realize they have a short self-life. Just don't look for your dream girl in a go-go bar. Think of them as attractions in an adult Disneyland. A nice place to visit, but you don't want to live there. The working girls are fun. Accept them for what they are. Love him and leave him. One more thing. Remember, the Farang always pays. They know you are richer than them, therefore, they feel no guilt about you picking up the tab. Good luck, son. You're going to need it. Every day will be an adventure. Expect the unexpected. Don't expect the law to offer any protection. The biggest mafia in the country are the police. Thanks, I'll remember what you said. At least my eyes will be open when the plane lands. I owe you. I hope that our paths cross again. I'm sure we'll talk again, he replied. Your advice is greatly appreciated. I don't know if I'm ready for this. He gave me his phone number. I knew I would be calling him, sooner or later. The plane landed, and we set off to follow our individual destinies. As soon as I left the airport, the Bangkok air enveloped me. It was hot and humid. I started sweating immediately. The air smelled of unknown plant life, auto exhaust, Thai spices, and elements I could not identify. It would take me a while before I adjusted to my new home. I bought a condo and settled into my new life. The next several months were a haze of bars and women. Each promised to love me long time as long as I bought them drinks, paid the bar fine, the fee to take a girl out of the bar, and paid them about 2,000 baht, $50 to $60, the next morning. I never forgot that it was all about the money. All of them very happy to see my money. They truly loved my wallet. As soon as I would enter my favorite bar, I would be surrounded by 3 or 4 near-naked women. I was aware that what I truly wanted, I couldn't buy. A very pretty girl told me that she missed every day and she happy for my return. That was strange. I had never seen her before. I met many expats who had been playing the game for years. They were dedicated sex-mongers, commonly called punters. To each his own, I guess. None that I met seemed really happy. They drank a lot and complained about the Thai way of doing things constantly. After a while, It looked like I had traded one kind of hell for another. They seemed to be lonely even with two beautiful girls sitting on their lap. To me, life had to have some meaning greater than mindless hedonistic self-gratification. Sex without love or real intimacy gets old real quick. Every place I went in Soy Cowboy, Nana Plaza, and Pat Pong, I was greeted with, "Hi, handsome man. What your name? You want buy me drink and pay bar find me? Oh, you so big. Where you stay? Let's go your hotel. I love you too much." They were all different, yet the same. I couldn't believe my eyes when I entered my first go-go bar. It was Susie Wong's, I think, in Soy Cowboy. There were at least 40 topless dancers flirting with big-bellied customers from all over the world. Some of them danced, while others shuffled their feet. Many of the men were obnoxious and drunk, and the women were young and sexy. The music was loud and smoke hung heavy in the air. It struck me as a strip club on steroids. Every female in sight was on sale. The dancers wore numbers. All a man had to do was tell them a massin what number he wanted, and the dancer would come to his table to talk business. Most wanted a quick short-time trip to a nearby hotel so they could get back and try it again. The entire place, and the others like it, was a commercial sex machine. If a guy was looking to get laid, he was in the right place. I soon found out that the bar fine was usually around $15, 500 to 600 baht. Following Gary's advice, I fell in love every day with Tip, Noi, Korn, Da, and a number of others whose names I can't remember. They were not like professional sex workers in the States. Most tried to provide a girlfriend experience for a price. Often money would not be mentioned until the next morning. How much I gave a lady was up to me. The usual rate for a long-time visit, one night, was about 2,000 baht, $50 to $60. At least, I got the pleasure of a beautiful, cooperative woman for a couple of hours or a night. I wondered how long I could live on a steady diet of make-believe bullshit. How many guys have spent big bucks at home trying to impress some self-absorbed, spoiled female with his ability to provide and ended up with a peck on the cheek? At least, the hookers I kept company with were honest about their intent. I found them charming, feminine, calculating, and predatory. Nevertheless, I drank too much, stayed up too late, and had too much loveless, meaningless sex. I felt lonely and empty without a woman to call my own. At least, I didn't waste any time thinking about the world I left behind. I woke up one morning with two women in my bed, and I had no idea who they were or how they got there. I realized that I needed more than an endless series of one-night stands. My behavior was out of character. I felt like a dog chasing my own tail. I was sexually drained, yet frustrated. It was the price for becoming a Bangkok warrior, as Gary had put it. Then, my world changed. Lamai came into my life. She was able to read the quiet desperation in my eyes. That ability to sense my need was to cost me dearly later. Lamai was a walking Asian sex machine. I first saw her on the SkyTrain. She was dressed in a business suit which was both very sexy and classy at the same time. She was tall for a Thai, and her skin was lighter due to her Chinese heritage. She was about 5 feet 9 inches in heels. Her short skirt emphasized her long legs. She moved with the grace of a leopard, and her face took my breath away. I couldn't help but smile like a smitten adolescent as my eyes locked onto her. I wanted to run my fingers through her raven black hair which flowed down her back. I was in love. She noticed my gaze and returned my smile. She looked to be an office worker of some kind. She had a class about her that separated her from the Ison peasant girls I had been sleeping with. I found out later that she an office temp. At least, that's what she said. I quickly introduced myself and was relieved that her English was pretty good. I asked if she could meet me somewhere for coffee, dinner, a walk in the park, anything. She said she could meet me at Starbucks on Sukhumvit Road at 6 p.m. We met and my life took a new turn. Time passed quickly. She was easy to get along with and curious about many things. I told her about my life back in the States and how I hoped to meet someone in Thailand to settle down with. Her eyes seemed to light up when I told her that. I wanted to believe the light in her eyes was showing genuine interest in me and not dollar signs. I like Farong Min. Thai man no good. He butterflies too much, cannot trust, she said, searching my face for a reaction. I need man who want to take care of me, and I take good care of him. I 28 now, getting old. I thought to myself, here we go, the same old bullshit. Old? This woman is a vision, a work of art, I thought to myself. In the States, she would stop traffic and cause old men to have heart attacks. She had no idea of how pretty she actually was. Where I came from, men would pay just to talk with her. In Thailand, she was one of many. She didn't look like she was old to me. Lamai was at that age when women begin to blossom to full womanhood. Her easygoing feminine ways felt like quicksand to me, as I was pulled in deeper and deeper. She told me she had to work 7 days a week sometimes and made only 10,000 baht a month, about $260. From that, she had to pay for rent, food, car fare, and send money to her family in the province. She was raised near the northern city of Chiang Rai. I didn't detect any self-pity, just acceptance of her fate. As she spoke, I couldn't help but feel the need to help her, to give her my protection. I hadn't felt like that in many years. She wasn't a bar girl. I felt safe with her. I decided to try to be Prince Charming. I know, big mistake. I choked back the nagging warnings that Gary had planted in my head, yet they were always there. I proceeded to explore the possibilities with caution. Do you have a boyfriend? No, no boyfriend. I was married before. He no good, drink too much and spend money at casino. He has a minor wife. She calls house sometimes, 'cause big trouble. Then, he beat me and tell me he leaving. I not see him again and cry a lot. I wanted to kick his butt for hurting her. She somehow brought out my protective instincts. I knew what Gary would say if I told him that was falling so hard for Lamai so soon. He would say, "Watch your back, son." She seemed different from the sharks I had been warned about and had associated with in the bars. I wanted to believe she really was different. I decided to proceed with caution. I think you kind and good man. I can read you. You need lady care for you. Many Thais ladies like you very much. I don't care about many Thais ladies. I want you to like me. Why? I think you are beautiful and a nice person too. I'm not so special. Many Thais ladies like me. Maybe, you know like me much when you know me better. I wondered if she was trying to tell me something. I didn't want to think about that. How did you learn English so well? I go to English school and pick up here and there. You think I talk good? Better than most? I was just curious. I knew that frequent contact with Farangs was how bar girls learned basic English. The first time we made love, I fell in love. Her body was firm and soft at the same time. Her skin, like fine Asian silk, was addictive. We started make slow, passionate love. That didn't last long. Soon, we were devouring each other. All of my pain, frustration, and loneliness came pouring out. I never wanted to let her go. Melting into one another, passion and lust overwhelmed me. I couldn't get enough of her. We made love until exhaustion overtook me. The next morning I woke up to her climbing onto my manhood. It was pure sex, just wild sensuality and pleasure. I loved it. Then, she gave me a massage that made me horny again. It scared me to feel that happy and young again. Despite my resolution to control myself, I was becoming more vulnerable by the minute. Weeks and months passed. Lamai was all I ever wanted or needed in a woman. It didn't take long before I wanted her to move in with me. When I mentioned it, she said, maybe soon, and changed the subject. Having all of the advantages and none of the disadvantages of a live-in girlfriend worked for me. There was no rush. I let it drop. Things were fine the way we were. I felt like a king. She was with me almost every evening. She washed my clothes, cooked for me, cleaned my condo, and gave me mind-blowing sex as often as could handle it. She never asked for money, and her favorite expression was, "Up to you." We went to many places together. Lamai was always close by, discreetly touching me in some way. I couldn't believe I was in a relationship that did not require constant compromise or argument. She never once flirted with another man. I enjoyed their envious looks when we were out together. Whenever I took her someplace or bought her a present, she always showed appreciation for my thoughtfulness. I couldn't believe my luck. We took care of each other. I needed to do something to fill my time while Lamai was at work. I found an orphanage not far from where I lived and began to teach English. The kids were fun, and I loved spending time with them. I don't know if I was any good at it, but the kids loved me, and they became important to my existence. I met some dedicated people at the orphanage. There was a young teacher there whose friendly help and pretty face caught my eye. Her name was Thung. I decided not to pursue her. She'd secretly would look at me with inviting eyes, but I was determined to be faithful to Lamai. Thung was the kind of woman that would fully expect the man she had sex with to marry her. She was the definition of a good girl. Temptation to stray was everywhere. In massage parlors, beer bars, and just strolling down the street. I had enough on my plate with Lamai. She didn't leave me with enough energy to deal with other women. When I wasn't teaching, I went to Thai language school. In time, my comprehension became pretty good. My ability to actually speak Thai progressed more slowly. Remembering what Gary had said, I kept my knowledge to myself. It was astounding to hear what Thais said in the presence of Farong. They have this ability to call a Farong the son of soy dog or water buffalo as they smiled in your face. The love for Farong was not nearly equal to their love of Farong money. For some reason, I didn't let Lamai know that I was studying Thai and could understand some of her phone conversations. I needed more time to completely trust her. Her mysterious nature was both exotic and somehow threatening. She often said that Farang who know too much no good. I wondered why she would think that. I knew that all women have their secrets, especially Thai women. I wanted access to those secrets before I could lower my guard. She tended to have trouble accounting for where she'd been and what she had been doing from time to time. I decided to sleep with one eye open, so to speak. I watched and waited for any red flags to appear, hoping none would. Anxiety churned inside me. I was not about to trade one bad domestic situation for another. Time would sort things out. After several months, the haze of lust and infatuation had cleared enough for me to start looking at Lamai objectively. She didn't like me asking too many questions about her life. Sometimes, my efforts led to some serious mood swings and tantrums which passed quickly. I tended to avoid confrontations. My world started to unravel when I decided to ask some hard questions after I concluded things were not quite right. Why have I not met your family, Lamai? They live far, far. Don't worry. We go someday soon. Where did you get the money to buy the gold jewelry you have on your salary? Your phone cost at least 6,000 baht. And where do you disappear to for hours sometimes at night? I call you, but your phone is turned off. What's going on? Why you question me? I love you. Why you make trouble? You not trust me? My questions made her angry and agitated. I didn't understand her reaction. I was sensing doom on the horizon. I know you love me, but please answer my questions. Make me feel better. I need to know. We need to be honest with each other. To me, honesty, trust, and loyalty are very important. I will not put up with lying or any break of my trust. You should know this. I want us to be open with each other. I ask for nothing that I am not willing to give you. Do you understand what I'm saying? It is important for our future that you do. Why Farang always talk of trust and honesty? These things not so important in Thailand. Peace and family, keeping face more important. Farang think too much. I wondered what the hell did that mean? I had the strong feeling that my words and attitude confused her. It was as if she could not comprehend what I was getting at. She could not understand why I was making her lose face through my questions and insistence on the truth, which was extremely important to me. Problems tended to happen whenever the conversation became intense. Our normal ability to communicate became difficult when she didn't want to answer a question or deal with something unpleasant. She would use anger or the pretense of language difficulties to change the subject. I wasn't going to let her get away with it this time. You know, love me. You want to keep me in cage. I need freedom. You not understand me. You only care yourself. She was raising her voice, about to go off. Freedom to do what? I pay the bills and take care of you. What the hell are you talking about? Are you cheating on me? Can I trust you? I wasn't going to take any crap or deception. No, no, no. I know cheat. You are man I love. Only you, sweetheart. I visit my friends sometime. Gold from old boyfriend. He from Sweden, gone back long time. You jealous? No good. Now, I sad. Arthur. You make Lamai very sad. She ran into the bathroom and slammed the door. I could see that the conversation was going nowhere. As usual, her answers didn't satisfy me. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was either lying or not telling me the whole truth. Before I could consider taking the relationship to the next level, I had to find some answers. Looking back, I was compelled to confirm what my gut was already knew. I needed confirmation. When she came out of the bathroom, she was crying. She ran to me and placed her tear-stained face on my chest. I'm not mad now. I love you too much, sweetheart, she said, dropping to her knees. I was determined to get some answers. Okay, I want to meet your friends. Could I do that? She looked concerned for a minute, then she agreed. The next evening, I found myself in a restaurant filled with Thais. I was the only Farang there. Lamai had invited 5 of her friends to join us. 2 were male. I could understand a little of what was being said. I sat there spacing out, listening to the chatter until I heard one of the males, who she said was her cousin, say something to Lamai. When are you going to make your Farang uncle buy house for you? I know like you sleeping with this ugly water buffalo. You can make him pay 500,000 or maybe 1 million baht sinsat. Then, we can be together. Remember, I am your husband. You stink with the smell of this Farang. My first thought was what? Water buffalo. To be called uncle and water buffalo was a major insult and signaled great disrespect. 1 million baht was close to $30,000. Did I hear what I think I heard? Sinsat is the Thai version of a bride price. In Thailand, the prospective groom was sometimes expected to pay this to show honor to the bride and her family. Some families extorted this money from Farangs because they could. Sometimes, It was given back to the bride as a kind of marriage insurance. It is a practice that doesn't set too well with most Farangs. Thais expect Farangs to accept their culture and couldn't give a crap about theirs. Lamai and I had never seriously spoken of marriage or Sin Sat. She didn't seem upset by his insults. The scent of betrayal was strong in the air. What was this being together stuff? Husband? My throat tightened with rage, sadness, and pain. Resignation soon followed. I had to accept what I had just heard. I was beginning to feel like an old warrior myself. My world had crashed. Who was this woman? I decided to play the hand out. I wanted to see what would happen next. I controlled the anger building in my heart. I knew revenge was a risky thing in Thailand. There would surely be retaliation from her husband and friends. I needed a plan. However, I was not going to let her get away with her treachery. I thought, how could she do this to me? I wondered what I had done in a past life to deserve this treatment. I treated her like a princess. It appeared that the reason she never pressured me for money was that I was being set up for the big score. I braced myself for the end of my relationship. I tried to wall off my emotions for self-protection. The end was near. I would miss her. I hoped that in her own way, she really did care for me, or did she? She surely didn't define love the way I did. When she used the word, it was hollow, having little or no meaning. I began to wonder if she even liked me. It was hard to believe anybody could be that good of an actress. When the dinner was over, her friends went their way. I heard the man who had been speaking to Lamai earlier say, "Soon you can come back to my bed and leave this stinking big Willie Farong. You should be with me, your husband. Pressure him. Tell him you must be married soon." He smiled at me as he spoke. It was everything I could do to keep from snapping his skinny neck and hers. Lamai laughed at his remarks. She took my arm lovingly as we walked back into the crowded Bangkok street. I had to be patient, but not too patient. I needed time to put my condo up for sale and arranged to move to the northern city of Chiang Mai. After I took my revenge for Lamai's betrayal, I would move far away. Lamai started throwing very strong hints that she wanted me to make an honest woman out of her. When she went to sleep, I searched her purse for the first time. I found 2 phones. One of them had names like Ryan, Nathan, Luke, and Vince stored in it. I resisted the urge to throw the phone out of the window. She had a date book with client names, dates, and hotels. I felt like such a sucker. The times indicated were all between 6 p.m. and 10 o'clock. After work, she was an escort. That's why she never needed to ask me for money. I had to give it to her. She's good. "Sweetheart, do you love me?" she asked in her most vulnerable voice. "Sure, I do. Why do you ask?" The game had begun. "I want us to marry. When I take you to family, I must say that we will marry." "Why?" "I lose big face and family if they know I sleep with you and not marry." I almost laughed in her face. She was using Thai logic on me. What she said was true, even more true when in the provinces. Too bad she was full of crap and already married. I might have been sympathetic. "I think you're right, Lamai. You are a loving, faithful companion. I should marry you. We should marry soon. I want you to be my wife. I will love you forever." "Oh, sweetheart. I'm so happy. I tell family and friends. I want marry in province, so village can come and see my handsome husband. My family will gain much face." She paused for a minute. "You know you give family Sin Sat. It is Thai tradition. Very important." "I know about Sin Sat. How much?" "I think 1 million baht." She said it as a question. "A million baht. I'm not rich," I said, playing her game. She thought another minute and said, "Okay, 500,000 would be okay." She looked at me with hopeful eyes. "I think I can do that. It's a heavy price, but I want to make you happy." Tears slid down her face. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn her look portrayed genuine gratitude and love. She hugged me for a long time, not speaking. Her arms trembled. The heat of her hands penetrated my back. She was good. "Sweetheart, I not deserve man like you. I must have been very good in past life. Our love very strong. I love you too much," she said as she seductively stripped for me. Testosterone surged through my veins. If I could not have her loyalty, I would take her body, probably for the last time. I felt like I was cursed to love unfaithful women. "I am going to give you some money. I want you to go home and arrange an engagement party. Invite everyone in the village. Buy lots to eat and drink. Hire a band. You know what to do. Go tomorrow. I will join you in 3 days. I will bring Sin Sat and many baht of gold for all to see when I come to the party. Everyone will be jealous of you. They will know how much I treasure your love and devotion to me." "Devotion? It means being true and loyal," I said, gritting my teeth. Then I took her, not caring about her pleasure, only mine. I did her with anger and lust. Then we rested exhausted in each other's arms, each lost in their own thoughts. She left the next day to set everything up. I rented out my condo and had my possessions shipped to Chiang Mai. On the day of the big party, I called Lamai. Many people will come. Everyone wants to see you, and my sin sought. I want to see you, handsome man. Please hurry. I wait for you every minute. She was very excited. I will be there. Start the party. I will come soon. I love you, bye. I hung up the phone with sadness in my heart. I would never see her again. The loss of face she was about to suffer would be powerful revenge for her betrayal. On the day of the party, there were at least 200 people in attendance. People danced, ate, and drank with abandon. The messenger that I had hired entered the room and went directly to the microphone after whispering something in a band member's ear. He spoke in Thai. Attention, please. I have a message from the man Lamai is supposed to marry. The crowd hushed, a ripple of curiosity spreading through the room. He says he will not be coming tonight. He will not come because Lamai is a lying, cheating woman who doesn't love him. She's already married and planned to divorce her husband after receiving her sin sought and new house. He says his heart is broken and hopes she spends the rest of her life reflecting on what could have been, until she's old and gray. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Lamai, who stood frozen in shock, her face an unreadable mask before twisting into a mixture of rage, embarrassment, and disbelief. She trembled slightly as if every eye in the room burned into her. That damned Farang tricked me, she hissed to her husband, who sat nearby looking equal parts drunk and disappointed. Meanwhile, I was adjusting well to my new life. Chiang Mai's cooler weather and fresher air made it a welcome change from Bangkok. I found a small orphanage and began teaching English again, something that gave me purpose. If I ever craved female company, it wasn't hard to find. All it took was a stroll through certain parts of town to hear the familiar refrain. Hello, handsome man. Where are you from? You want take me hotel for Boom Boom? Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Discovered my wife is cheating when her affair partner punched her into the hospital. So I did this and now years later, she can't accept my engagement to my fiancé. If ever there was a prize for the most horrible way to learn of your significant other's affair, I would probably win it and be in its Hall of Fame. Like so many people in this sub, I suddenly found myself as a member of a club that nobody ever wants to be a part of. I will never forget the sound of my ex-sister-in-law's voice as she kept saying, I'm sorry, over and over on the phone while I drove home from a week-long business trip. I was confused and had absolutely no idea what she meant, but only after I managed to calm her down somewhat did she inform me that my wife was in the hospital and that I needed to hurry home. My mind went into overdrive as I tried to get more information as well as not crash while I began speeding to get there faster. The only thing she told me is that it was an assault, and then cut the call and wouldn't answer when I tried to call her again. A bit of background. My ex and I met in our mid-20s. It was through a mutual friend at a barbecue. At first, she seemed almost too good to be true. Not only was she incredibly beautiful, but she was also shy and introverted. It took a while for us to officially date, but once it happened, I was over the moon. When we first tried to get intimate, she suddenly started crying. She'd have taken this as a bad sign. I freaked out and thought it was something I did, but she apologized the next day and told me she was triggered. As it turns out, 2 years ago before meeting me, she was in a long-term relationship and a guy that was abusive both emotionally, physically, as well as mentally. He would degrade her during the moments of intimacy, then apologized afterward. She had a flashback, but reassured me it had nothing to do with me. So we took things slow as she was still in therapy. It was tough, but because I loved her, I believed once we got over this, it would make our relationship stronger, and for a while it honestly appeared that way. Fast forward another year, and we got engaged. First-time intimacy also happened during this stage. I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a house for us courtesy of inheritance from my late uncle. Things were going great, and I have seriously suggested we plant a peach tree, important for later on, to signify new beginnings, and she was all for it. We were wedded not long after that, and quite frankly, it was absolutely amazing. Of course, we had our normal ups and downs like every murdered couple, but I considered us more lucky because she always made it a point to never go to bed upset with each other, and she would always point out gently if I did anything that upset her. Sometime later, life basically happened and I was promoted at my job. It meant more pay, But it also meant I would be traveling more for work conferences and business meetings. I noticed she had been getting down a lot more and wasn't being as intimate as before. She would keep her phone close to her and even stopped gently addressing things that upset her. I tried to talk to her about it, but she assured me that she was fine and this was a phase she was going through and having no reason to not trust her and let it go. She would sometimes go to her sister's place and spend the night telling me she just needed a bit of girl time with her sister. The day I got that fateful phone call was the day she was meant to be keeping her sister company again. I remember rushing into the hospital barely breathing and frantically asking about my wife when world's most understanding and patient police officer sat me down to explain what happened. He told me he was a friend of my sister-in-law and he happened to respond to a domestic disturbance call. He arrived on the scene to find a couple fighting. The supposed boyfriend was on top of the female punching her and she was screaming trying to scratch him. This didn't make any sense to me because, 1, it had nothing to do with my wife because we're married, and 2, literally everyone who knew my wife knew she wouldn't do that. He gave me a knowing look and placed his hand on my shoulder, then told me to be very calm because said girlfriend was actually my wife. If it weren't for the severity of the situation, I would have laughed in his face, but something in the way he said everything made me believe him. I then was ushered in by a nurse to see my wife, and what greeted me to this day, I still can hardly find the words to describe it. I just stood there for what seemed like an eternity. Then a doctor came in and explained her injuries to me. The jaw was slightly fractured. Her left eye was completely swollen shut and had massive bruising covering half of her face as well as 3 broken ribs. Then the doctor dropped another bomb and told me she was pregnant. I still couldn't understand how this happened. Then I caught sight of her sister. She at first tried to avoid me, but at the persuasion of her police officer friend, she told me what she knew. It turns out my wife's ex had gotten in contact with her 5 months ago. He was doing this redemption pyramid step thing where he would apologize to people he has wronged in order to clear his karma. Anyone else's betrayed spouse meter going crazy right now? They began talking more, then he convinced her to meet up for coffee and show her he was a changed man. Obviously, old feelings resurfaced coupled with the fact that he appeared changed now. It soon developed into an emotional affair. My wife approached her sister for advice, who told her to take things slow and just get it out of her system if she needed to, which then led to a physical affair 3 months later. She actually told my wife that she should at least make peace with her ex in whatever form it may be, and even offer to cover for my wife once in a while. My sister-in-law was in tears at this point and kept apologizing to me saying that she didn't know about the abuse as my wife never told anyone other than me and her therapist at the time about it. I was numb. I just couldn't feel anything and was absolutely dumbfounded by my wife's actions. When my wife finally woke up, I was there and she burst into tears upon seeing me. I spent the following months in zombie flight mode. There was individual counseling for her as well as marriage counseling for us at the strong urging of her family. In counseling, she was surprisingly forthcoming about how it happened and how she absolutely hated herself for causing me pain. She mentioned how at one point on her way home from his place, she actually fantasized about driving into the river because she smelled like him and didn't want his scent to corrupt me. However, that made sense. She said she then tried to end it, but it was too weak, and only after learning that she was pregnant that it actually woke her up and made her realize that any further contact with this man was toxic to not only her but the unborn child as well. Hence, went to end things in person for good when he snapped on her. She became a shell of herself and developed a phobia for any other males but me. At one point, she couldn't even use the bathroom at night unless I was holding her hand. Sad, right? After the baby was born, son by the way, we got our paternity test and he was mine. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized I didn't hate my wife. I actually loathed her. I couldn't see the woman I married, but instead saw his leftovers each time I looked at her. I decided to leave because I was afraid I'd do something I'd regret and be exactly like her abusive ex. She begged me not to leave and even made the ridiculous offer of giving me a hall pass as well as slapping her if I wanted to. I knew at this point I had to get out. She was actually very generous during the divorce. She moved back into her parents and signed a very well thought out co-parenting plan issued by the courts. Moving forward 3 years later and I meet my now fiancé by chance. I was in a bookstore with a buddy of mine, and we were discussing Egyptian mythology when this beautiful woman approached me to correct me on my pronunciation of the Egyptian god cities. Needless to say, I'm instantly impressed by not only her understanding but also by the fact that she is Egyptian herself. We exchanged numbers which eventually led us to dating. When I finally proposed to her, it was actually in front of the peach tree I had planted years ago. I got down on one knee, but before I got my answer, she ran into the house and came out with a ring as well. Turns out she was actually planning on proposing herself because she was madly in love with me, and she didn't just want any other woman to have me. My son, in all his sweet childlike innocence, told his mother what happened because he was present when it happened. My ex literally showed up that night in the rain yelling about how could I propose to her, my fiancé, in front of our tree, and that this is the end of us. I am completely exhausted at this point. I cannot go no contact because she is the mother of my child, but she is basically harassing me and my fiancé. How do I convince her to move on, to get over her fear of men, and not force me to get a restraining order? Sorry it was long, but I am really desperate. Edit. I wanted to ask a question to the insightful women of Reddit. Something that still bugs me to this day is the fact that she even made time for her ex who took pleasure in destroying her only for her to suffer a much worse fate. Is it normal for the abused to want the attention of the abuser even if she might hate him? The person who took pleasure in my ex said once. Edit 2. Forgot to add this in the original post. When my fiancé presented me with a ring which she was going to use to propose to me, she had an engraving on the inner band which dates to my pharaoh. Damn, I love this woman. Update. First off, a big thank you to the user Mama2045 for your simple yet amazing advice. Saved us a lot of trouble. Now on to what has happened so far. Since my last post, my son's birthday was coming up and he told us he wanted to have a camp night for it. Now I must explain, the boy absolutely loves the outdoors. Everything from camping to hiking to even playing in rivers are his favorite, and obviously due to an ongoing situation, we cannot go to our usual spots. So I offered my backyard for it. Another request he had was for my ex to sleep over as well. He wanted to imitate a scene from one of his kid adventure shows where both parents were sitting on either side of the child, and all three are roasting marshmallows on the campfire. Now I had absolutely no intention of denying my son's birthday wishes, but at the same time, I couldn't have my ex sleep in the same tent as me and my son. That would be far too disrespectful to my fiancé, even though she said she understood. It was clear she wasn't okay with it. My ex seemed to take advantage of this and kept saying how much she was looking forward to spending the night with her two men, and even went as far as to buy a whole lot of camping equipment that would put Bear Grylls to shame. She was certainly trying to rub it in my fiancé's face, and wasn't graceful about it either. I had to tell her to stop a couple of times, but she only relented when I threatened to invite her sister. Ever since our divorce, my ex has had a burning hatred for her sister. She, my ex, acknowledges her role in the destruction of our marriage, but blames her sister for encouraging the affair and not safeguarding from her making choices that would ruin hers, but more importantly, according to her, our life together. It's gotten so bad that she refuses to let her sister spend any significant amount of time with her son, which at one point caused my ex-sister-in-law to have severe depression. My ex-sister-in-law has been trying for years to reconcile with her sister, but it just seems to get worse as time goes on. A Redditor, Mama2045, offered me a simple and effective solution. She suggested I go out and purchase a multi-room tent, that way my fiancé could be included. I wasted no time and immediately went out to get one. Of course, my ex wasn't too happy about that, but was glad to be under the same roof as me. During the birthday celebration, my son was on cloud 9. He ran around the yard and pretended he was a great explorer discovering a new land. When evening came, I made the fire and my ex provided the marshmallows. He excitedly sat between us and started roasting his marshmallow alongside us. What I didn't expect was after we were done taking pictures and making s'mores, he handed my fiancée a stick and a marshmallow as well and sat next to her to make his second s'more. It's honestly a mystery how something this pure and perfect could come out of the absolute mess that was the relationship between me and my ex. My ex asked for a bit of my time, to which I obliged. We stepped into the kitchen and she apologized for her behavior on the day that I proposed, but not for her actions following that. She told me she still sees me as her husband in her mind, so the thought of me giving my heart to another terrified her. She said she never wanted to cause me pain and would give anything to go back in time and undo her mistakes. She mentioned how happy she was when the paternity test showed that I was the father because she thought it was a new beginning for us and that he was proof of our love. I thanked her for the courage to share all of this, but told her I was happy with where I was in life and with whom I was with, but hoped she would find someone to make her happy as well. She said she meant what she told me on that day we divorced and will wait for me. I left the kitchen feeling exhausted because none of what I was trying to say got through to her. We decided to call it a night where me and my fiancé slept in one room with the tent and my ex with my son and another. All in all, a good birthday for my son, but not so good night for me.